My name is John Mursky. I'm the chair of the Ann Arbor Energy Commission. And as chair, I'm calling this meeting to order at 6:01 p.m. So welcome to the September 14th, 2021 electronic meeting of the Energy Commission. This meeting is to affect social distancing and mitigate the spread of the COVID-19 virus. We will conduct this meeting similar to in-person meetings. Commissioners, please remain on camera just as you would be visible during in-person meetings. Also mute your microphones when not speaking. Public comment will be via telephone only. To speak during any of the public opportunities, that will be one at the beginning and one at the end of the meeting, please call one of the following toll-free numbers: 888-788-0099 or 877-853-5247 and enter meeting ID 913-5783-4502. These numbers will remain the same through the entire year for Energy Commission meetings. And this information, along with 2 local dial-in numbers, is available on the public agenda in the public notices section of the city's website and on the broadcast of this meeting on CTN channel 16, AT&T channel 99, and online at www.a2gov.org/watchctn. So actually, I just realized something that I need to change in my script, and that is the local numbers are no longer appearing on the agenda. So we're just using the 2 toll-free numbers that I mentioned. Missy, would you please read the land acknowledgement?
Happy to, Chair Mursky. I acknowledge that the land the city of Ann Arbor occupies is the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary lands of the Anishinaabe and Wyandot people. I further acknowledge that our city stands, like almost all property in the United States, on lands obtained generally in unconscionable ways from Indigenous peoples. The taking of this land was formalized by the Treaty of Detroit in 1807. Knowing where we live, work, study, and recreate does not change the past, but a thorough understanding of the ongoing consequences of this past can empower us in our work to create a future that supports human flourishing and justice for all individuals.
Thank you very much. So we will now go through the roll call, and Missy will administer the roll call. But as we do so, I'd like to have our 3 new commissioners, Jonathan Overpeck, also known as Peck, Judith or Edie, Edith, or Edie Juno, and Nicholas Cole Stevenson introduce themselves, as well as each one of the other, the former commissioners, all of us present commissioners, also to give a very brief introduction of yourself to each of our 3 new commissioners and to welcome them. So Missy, if you would go through the roll call, and as you go through the roll call, or each one of us as we respond to the roll call, please also give the location where you're joining the meeting from. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair Mursky. Commissioner Hookham.
Good afternoon, Chuck Hookham from my office in Ann Arbor today. Brief background, I have about 42 years experience in the energy industry, ranging from design, construction, commissioning, operation of generating plants, transmission distribution, building energy systems, pretty much an energy geek. Worked on a lot of renewable energy, battery storage, infrastructure as well. Try to support the city on a lot of policy statements. I work with the state of Michigan, Michigan Public Service Commission a lot as a consultant and in various other fashions. And I have my own consulting practice, so I use that quite a bit as well. So welcome to the new commissioners. Look forward to working with y'all.
Thanks, Commissioner Hookham. Commissioner McComber.
Hi, I'm calling from my home in Ann Arbor, and I've been on the Energy Commission, I think going on 5 or 6 years. Previous to that, I was on Parks Commission for 2 3-year terms. My day job is finance director at a local nonprofit that also does work in the area of energy, renewable energy, EVs, etc. And I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Commissioner McComber. Commissioner Cleavy.
First of all, welcome to the Energy Commission. It's good to have some new blood. My name is Mark Cleavy. Did my first solar project in 1975. Worked as manager of the energy office and at the state level. Worked for a number of cities and counties and businesses in renewable energy, and I'm currently representing the vice president of the Great Lakes Renewable Energy Association, which is an industry association representing solar interests in Michigan. And look forward to hearing your thoughts on solar energy.
Commissioner Levin, I believe, is not with us. Chair Mursky.
Thank you. I'm John Mursky. I'm an Ann Arbor native, went to the University of Michigan, left for graduate school and moved back in 2015. I worked my entire career for Robert Bosch, the German conglomerate, where I had a number of different positions in regional and global business unit management, and then also was responsible for North American corporate functions, technical and engineering functions. I've been on the Energy Commission since 2017 and have been chair for a little over a year. And I'm married. My wife and I will have our 39th anniversary this Thursday. And we have 2 grown children that both live outside of the area. And welcome to our 3 new commissioners.
Thanks, Chair Mursky. Vice Chair Colvin Garcia.
My name is Carolyn Colvin Garcia, and I'm joining you this evening from my home in Ann Arbor. And I have a background in clean transportation, and I currently am focusing on electric vehicle charging. And I come to the Energy Commission. I've been on the Energy Commission since 2017, and I was very interested in figuring out how the city and the school district could work together to bring solar power to the district. So that really was a great opportunity to learn about all the activity the Energy Commission was involved in. And fortunately, I was able to help get a grant for the local STEAM school. They were the first school in the district to get solar power installed on their roof. And I just continued to attend Energy Commission meetings, and then I became a commissioner, and I've been active since then. My most recent significant result that I helped to deliver was co-authoring with a great group here in the commission the EV readiness ordinance that went into effect early this year. And welcome to all 3 of you. And during our orientation, my microphone on my computer wasn't working. So now at least you get to hear my voice.
Thank you, Caroline. Commissioner McCoy.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ember. I'm a PhD student at the University of Michigan in the School for Environment and Sustainability. I was trying to figure out how long I've been a commissioner. Somewhere between 2 and 3 years. I moved to Ann Arbor in 2015 and have either been a student or a staff member at SEAS that entire time. And I've done and continue to do a lot of energy related organizing outside of that in the state and in other states. I think I first came to an Energy Commission meeting when I was also coming as a resident working on trying to get DTE to stop building new natural gas plants. Unfortunately, that plant was built, but that was my first introduction to the EC, and yeah, I'm calling from Ann Arbor. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner McCoy. Commissioner George.
Thank you, Missy. Robert George, calling in from Ann Arbor. I am a recent resident of Ann Arbor. I've been on the commission going on year 2. I work for the Laborers Union. I'm a member of Local 499. I do policy work primarily with cities and counties across the state. Our members do a lot of energy projects ranging from renewable to nuclear to gas across the state. So involved in that way with energy, as well as being active with the Parks Commission and serving as a commissioner at the county level in that capacity. Thank you, Missy.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Kerber.
Yes, I'm Larry Kerber. I'm calling from here in Ann Arbor. I guess I started out life as an engineer and came to Ann Arbor to do my MBA at the University of Michigan, basically never left. So I'm a long-term Ann Arbor resident. I've been on the Energy Commission for about a year. My background is I've been in various corporate positions, but I've spent the last 5 years working for a local solar developer, developing primarily around Washtenaw County. And welcome new commissioners.
Thank you, Commissioner Kerber. Councilmember Briggs.
Thank you. I'm here in Ann Arbor. I represent City Council for the 5th Ward, which is on the west side, and my day job is running an organization called Scenic Michigan, so a lot of work on scenic conservation issues, and then I have a background in a lot of sort of transportation, alternative transportation issues, as well as land use, serving on the Planning Commission before I was on council. Welcome to our new commissioners and to everybody else who's serving as well.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Tredina.
Thanks. I'm Travis Tredina. I represent Ward 3 on City Council since November and have been on the Energy Commission for that full time as well. I live in the Arbor Oaks Bryant neighborhood. Honestly, I have to say I am often incredibly impressed at just the breadth of experience and knowledge that we have on this commission. And so I really enjoy learning from folks here. Prior to getting involved, actually this week I've been very engaged in Energy Commission work at council. But prior to joining the Energy Commission, in my previous experience, I was president of the Jim Toy Community Center, which is the LGBTQ center here. But before moving back to Ann Arbor, I worked for State Representative Kate Siegel in Lansing. And one of the primary things that kind of got me interested and passionate about energy work is that her district was ground zero for the Enbridge oil spill. And so we dealt with a lot of that and the cleanup and the repercussions from that. And so that's really what got me interested in this work to begin with. So thanks to the new commissioners for joining.
Thank you. And to our new commissioners, let's start with Commissioner Overpeck. Peck.
Hello, everyone. Yes, as Missy knows, I enjoy going by the name of Peck. I have returned to Michigan 4 years ago. I grew up in Jackson in the metro area until I went to middle school, and then I was out east, and then I migrated after a bunch of schooling out west, where I've been a climate scientist for about 40 years, yikes. And doing all sorts of more natural climate science, but I work a lot with social scientists as well. As I noted, I came back to Michigan 4 years ago. I've actually married into a Michigan family, so I've been coming here for about 35 years in the summers. But I came back to serve as the inaugural dean of the School for Environment and Sustainability, SEAS. I'm really happy to have a current PhD student on the same commission. Ember, good to see you, as well as at least one alum, I believe, Edie. Nope, two, we got Missy too. Missy and I, speaking of, are also serving together on the governor's, no, you're not on that. We served on the President's Commission on carbon neutrality. So we came up with a plan for Michigan, University of Michigan, to go carbon neutral. We're the largest university in the country, research university, to have such a plan, and also to decarbonize our endowment. We start that process. in a pretty aggressive way. I am on the Governor's Climate Solutions Council as well. And it's terrific that I've been invited to be on this commission after serving for a couple of years on the, or maybe it was just 1 year. It seemed with COVID, all time has been lost. On the Environmental Commission, I'm much more focused in my career now on climate action, on energy solutions, as well as ensuring a transition to a sustainable and just world. So very happy to join you all, and I applaud what you've been doing and look forward to doing more with you.
Thanks, Peck. Commissioner Juno.
Hello, everyone. I'm Edie Juno. I moved to Ann Arbor from Traverse City in 2017 for graduate school at SEAS, where I focus on conservation and also environmental policy. Since then, I've been working as a professional in a nonprofit, focusing on both kind of forest policy and climate policy, kind of at that intersection of energy and natural climate solutions. Yeah, and really excited to meet everyone and to be here. Thank you.
Commissioner Stevenson.
I'm a senior statistics student at Michigan right now, calling from Ann Arbor. On campus, I'm part of the Citizens Climate Lobby, and we advocate for a carbon fee and dividend bill. I'm also was an editor for the Michigan Foreign Policy Council. I did most of my research on environmental issues in that space, so EVs and state-owned energy. I could live in Florida, and I've worked for a lot of climate surveying down there for a nonprofit called Volo Foundation. And we just did a lot of stuff on hurricane impacts and heat index and things like that. And happy to meet everyone and good to be here today.
To have you. And I do believe that Commissioner Levin joined us.
Yes, I'm here. I'm having some internet issues, so I can't use a video at the moment. Hopefully I won't get disconnected.
Do you mind just telling us where you are connecting from?
Oh, okay. Sorry, yes. I am still at my house in Ann Arbor.
Great. Chair Mursky, you have a quorum and actually 100% attendance.
Thank you, thanks. And Noah, can you introduce yourself real quickly in your background? And then Missy, we're not going to let you get away from saying a few words about yourself too.
Yes, hopefully you can hear me okay. I am also, I guess, sort of a SEAS alumni. I don't know. It wasn't SEAS at the time, so I don't know what to call myself anymore. But that was my first introduction to Ann Arbor, and I eventually went on to law school with a specialty in environmental law at Lewis and Clark, and I haven't done stuff directly on energy, but more with clean air issues with stationary sources is my background that's most related to the Energy Commission, and currently live on the west side of Ann Arbor, and I have 2 kids that go to STEAM. And good to be working with you all.
Thanks, Noah. Missy.
Hi, everyone. I'm Missy Stoltz. I think everyone on the line in some way, shape, or form. I'm really lucky to be the first official head of the Office of Sustainability and Innovations for the City of Ann Arbor. We view ourselves as the caretaker of our city's audacious, ambitious, but essential goal to reach decarbonization by 2030. And my background is working, we're rounding out closer to 20 years now with local populations, indigenous populations around the nation on climate efforts, including resilience, climate mitigation, as well as equity programs. So excited to be here and to work with you all. Thank you, Chair Mursky.
Thank you, everyone. And I'm also incredibly honored to serve with all of you. I learn a lot from you, not just in these meetings, but in a lot of the emails that we also exchange behind the scenes and in conversations, things like that. So it's really great. And I think our 3 new commissioners are going to add a lot of new diversity and experience and knowledge to the group. So it's great. Just to acknowledge them, we have 2 of Missy's staff that are going to be presenting later, and they can introduce themselves later in the meeting. So having completed the roll call, let's move on to approval of the agenda. Hopefully everybody has had a chance to look at the agenda, and we can have a motion to approve the agenda along with a second.
Motion to approve the agenda.
Thank you. And the second?
Second.
Second from Bridget. Thank you, Commissioner McCumber and Commissioner George. All those in favor of approving the agenda as posted, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. That passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Next order of business is approval of the minutes. So we are approving the minutes of the July 13th meeting, if that's by memory. I think that's the right date. They are posted in Legistar, and hopefully you've had a chance to review them, as I have. And can I get someone to make a motion to approve the minutes? Councilmember Briggs, and a second from Commissioner Hookham. All those in favor, again, say aye or raise your hands. Aye. Again, those are approved unanimously. So we now move on to new business. And first point on the agenda, prior to public input, is going to be election of officers. And before I turn it over to Missy to administer that, she agreed to do so. I just wanted to say a few things. Article 6 of our bylaws ask or state that we are to elect a chair and a vice chair every year. In addition, we also have on the agenda to elect a liaison to the Environmental Commission. I currently serve in that role, as well as obviously as chair. The official date for commissioners is a start date of 6/1 to May 31st, and elections are supposed to take place no later than December. We got a little bit out of whack with COVID, and so we're holding that election now. It still is before December. What I'd like to mention is that there are also term limits of 3 years for chair and vice chair. Both Carleen and I are serving in our first, let's say, year and a half. But I have served for 3 years as Environmental Commission liaison. So that officially does not fall under the bylaws and the requirement, but I want you to take that into consideration when nominating and voting for people to represent us, or a person to represent us on the Environmental Commission. So Missy, will you please take over and administer this, first taking nominations and then any comments and statements, and then administer the vote.
Happy to, Chair Mursky. So at this point, I think we should start with chair. I would certainly entertain if anyone wants to nominate or self-nominate someone to be chair of the Energy Commission. Would anyone like to nominate?
Hey, Missy, I'd like to nominate John Mursky to retain his chair position if he's so willing.
Thank you so much. And we'll go Commissioner Mursky. Are you willing to consider that?
I am willing to do so.
Great. Do I have any other nominations? Hearing that, I would entertain a formal motion to appoint John Mursky as chair of the Energy Commission for a 1-year term.
Sounds like my duty.
So moved.
I was just gonna say, sounds like my duty since I nominated him. So I now formally nominate him to be chair.
Commissioner George, would you like to second?
I would. Sorry about that, Chuck.
That's great. All right. I'd like to take a vote at this point. All those in favor of Chair Mursky retaining his chair for 1 more year, please say aye or hand. All those opposed? Congratulations, Chair Mursky. I think at this point I can hand this back over to you to facilitate.
Thank you. Thanks, Missy. Thanks for the vote of confidence. The next position is vice chair, and I would like to entertain nominations for the vice chair position.
So I'll do the same. I think Carleen, if you're willing to be our vice chair, you did a great job last year. So I'd like to propose Carleen continue in that role if she's willing.
Are you willing, Carleen?
Yes, I'm willing to serve again. as vice chair together with Chair Mursky. Thank you.
Great. Are there any other nominations? Okay, do we need to actually do a formal nominate or move? Okay, we need someone to move to nominate Carolyn Garcia for vice chair. Do we have someone that will move to nominate her, and then a second?
I move that we nominate Colvin Garcia to serve as vice chair.
Thank you, Commissioner McComber. Do we have a second? Second, Commissioner Hookham. So all those in favor of electing Colvin Garcia for our vice commissioner, please raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Congratulations, Carlene. I look forward to working with you again. We've been, I think, very both compatible, but also complementary. Carlene has experience and approaches that are different than mine, and she helps me a lot behind the scenes. So thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
So the next position is environmental liaison to the Environmental Commission. And I'd like to, just before I open it up for nominations, would just like to say that I hope somebody else steps forward. I'm more than willing to do it again. But what I would ask is that if someone does so, that they obviously be a regular participant in meetings, but also in working groups. There's a lot of really good work that the Environmental Commission does. And so we would, I think, be best served if we have somebody who is going to play an active role, not only in those meetings, but also in the behind the scenes activities of working groups and things like that. So do we have someone that's interested in doing that? Yes, Chuck, do you?
I'd like to nominate Ember McCoy if she's willing to serve as our Environmental Commission liaison.
Ember?
I appreciate that, but I do not think I have the capacity to take it on. But thank you.
So, John, I'd like to ask a question.
Ember, we're not going to wait until you retire to accept that, like me. Go ahead, Chuck.
John?
Oh, was it Mark? Go ahead.
I'd like to ask a question. Do any of our three new commissioners great background and a combination of environmental and energy issues, and I think the opportunity to bring the Environmental Commission and the Energy Commission into closer synchronicity going forward in behalf of the Ann Arbor's climate plan is the real challenge. And we have three new people with exquisite background in all those two areas. So would any of the three of you be willing to do it? And if so, I'd more than happy to nominate you. Jonathan, you want to be nominated?
You know, I don't think I have the capacity. I'm like Ember. I mean,
okay, Edie?
I have been serving on it, and I don't think there's any way I could do two of these because I think you really need to do. It takes time, and as John mentioned, they do have the working groups. I was able to be on that committee without being on a working group, and it didn't. It didn't make me feel like I was shirking duty because you have some really dedicated people. But on the other hand, there's a wide range of issues that you want to stay up on. So it's at least a pretty busy one long night a month, and with some reading to do in preparation.
All right, that leaves Edie and Robert, or excuse me, not you moved, Cole. Either of you two interested?
I would be willing to do it.
Well, then how about you, Cole?
I'd be willing to join a working group, but if Edie wants to go ahead and do the liaison, I'm happy to let her do it.
Then I'd like to nominate Edie for the Environmental Commission liaison position.
Great. Commissioner or Councilmember Tredina, you had something you wanted to say, I think. No?
No, I think if Edie wants to do that, that's great. I was I didn't see them jump at it initially, so I was worried they weren't excited. But if Edie is willing to do this, I think having a fresh perspective in both roles could be really helpful.
Yeah.
So I would be happy to.
I agree.
So, do we have any other nominations? Could we have a formal motion then to nominate Edie and a second?
So moved.
From Commissioner Cleavy and second
Seconded.
from Commissioner Peck, over Peck. So I think this is a great nomination. And by the way, Edie, you shouldn't feel bad at all. I will continue to stay active in the working groups, and I think it's great that you're willing to step up and serve on both commissions. That's huge. So all those in favor of Edie Juno representing us on the Environmental Commission, say aye or raise your hands. Aye. Congratulations, Edie. That's an auspicious first night on the Energy Commission. Okay, so we can now move on to the next point in the agenda, which is public comment or public input. And I'll read my standard statement here. This is an opportunity for persons to speak for up to 3 minutes. If you are watching on CTN, please call 888-788-0099 or 877-853-5247 and enter meeting ID 913-5783-4502. This information is also displayed on the meeting agenda and the video feed. City staff will select callers that have raised their hand one by one using the last 3 digits of your phone number. In order to electronically raise your hand to indicate your desire to speak, please press *9 on your phone. You will hear an automated announcement and that the host is willing or allowing you to speak. And when speaking, please move to a quiet area to mute any background noise so that we may hear you clearly. Please state your name and address at the beginning of your comments. And by the way, I think I need to say you also need to press *9 or excuse me, *6 to actually speak, to unmute your phone. So Missy, do we have anybody that's interested in speaking?
Yeah, caller ending in 228.
Hello.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we do.
Hi, my name is Greg Woodring. I'm with Ann Arbor for Public Power. I'm a frequent caller, and I'm excited to see all of the new energy commissioners. My group has been working for the last year now to push for this idea of a municipal utility in Ann Arbor. We think it's a good idea because we have seen what other municipal utilities in the state do. They have cheaper power, they have lower rates on their power. They have more reliable power. Their power goes down less often, which in the face of these recent storms seems very relevant. DTE's infrastructure is extremely out of date. And as climate change gets worse, these storms are only going to get more powerful, and it's only going to get more important that we have strong, resilient infrastructure, which we can do on our own terms if we take control of the utility. But as I think is most important to all of us, we really care about meeting our 2030 climate neutrality goals, and we do not believe that there is any way to do this without moving towards a municipal utility. DTE has said that they will not be phasing out coal until 2040, and they will not ever phase out natural gas. That is unacceptable and out of line with the goals that Ann Arbor has set and the goals that the IPCC tells us is needed in order for the planet to survive. So I was very excited to see conversation on this topic in the City Council earlier this week. I was disappointed that the vote was moved back, but I hope that that will allow you all to have some healthy discussion about this. But please, I really hope that you move forward with a feasibility study soon so that we can get moving on this very important project, because we at Ann Arbor for Public Power believe it's a good idea. Jeff Irwin and Yusuf Rabi, who spoke at our recent fundraiser, think it's a good idea. And a lot of the people in the community think it's a great idea based on all of the support we've gotten while going out canvassing door to door. So really hope that you make some good progress on that issue. Really going to be listening closely to hear that discussion. We really, really hope that we can get some solid answers on what this would cost the city to do and what kind of revenue it could bring back to the city. What is the logistics of setting this up, and what can the citizens expect if they go down this route? Thank you all for your time. Bye.
And thank you for your comments. Is anyone else?
No, Chair Mursky. Okay. Oh, here we go. We have a caller ending in 134.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Stoltz and Chair Mursky. I'm Ken Garber, 28 Haverhill Court. By the way, the Zoom meeting ID on the published agenda does not work. Commissioner McCoy just now provided me with the correct meeting ID, and the previous caller got it also. Anyway, I also favor exploring the Muni option, but because community solar is on your agenda, I'm going to talk about the landfill solar project. This won't be true community solar because DTE will own it. The electricity will flow into DTE's regional grid, not to subscribers. The city's website says there is no guarantee that the city and township would receive the physical electrons that are being generated at the solar energy facility. Instead, we have a pilot project where the city will be the anchor tenant to presumably distribute RECs or other credits to subscribers to allow them to claim renewable electricity. I hesitated to speak tonight since everyone on council likes this deal, and probably I'm not well enough informed to understand it. And city staff has put a lot of work into it over years. When I asked back in June the reason for DTE ownership, staff answered that there's a liability associated with a cap landfill, and if panels broke and damaged the landfill, individual subscribers would be legally liable for repairs, and that wasn't the best way to come into community solar. Fair enough. I wouldn't have guessed that subscribers would be individually liable. But couldn't the city purchase some kind of group insurance coverage? And is the liability risk great enough to justify turning it over to DTE? This will be a very valuable asset in terms of both power and money. 24 megawatts are about 6% of our city's total power need, and it's by far our biggest community solar opportunity. Any others discussed tonight will pale in comparison. Michael Rivet, DTE's manager of product development, told City Council last year that the project will cost $40 to $50 million, plus or minus 30%. While we don't yet know the true cost, it's in the tens of millions of dollars. Of course, we should make this investment, but must we then give it away? If the city owned the project, I'm guessing that state law restricts local power distribution. Mr. Kinch may very well address that tonight. But if we established a parallel utility to compete with DTE, as Paul Fenn advised back in March, the city could legally distribute that electricity. Same goes for the full Muni option. So it's not an asset to be surrendered lightly. Again, I may be missing something obvious, and I'm very happy to be set straight about why this is a good deal for the city. But right now, I just don't see it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, the meeting ID on the calendar invite is 937-6751-6819. So it's the same phone number, but it's that the calendar invite meeting ID changed.
I'll look into that. I'm not sure what actually happened there, but caller ending in 120, or I'm sorry, 121.
Caller ending in 121. Press *6 to unmute your phone.
Hello?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. This is my first time doing it. My name is Alex Nettle. I'm a student in the area. I recently heard about the municipalization campaign, and I just wanted to call in and voice my support for it. It really excites me because, you know, the climate is, I mean, we've all looked at the news, right? We all see the storms, we all see the hurricanes, we all see what's happening right now. And I really hope that you guys move quickly on recommending a feasibility study, specifically because I'm sure we all remember what happened in Detroit over the summer with the flooding. I experienced it firsthand. I got stuck in the city and it was very dangerous, and I was one of the lucky ones to, you know, make it out pretty much unscathed, other than, you know, actually witnessing that trauma firsthand. But, you know, point being, there's going to be a lot more people who are going to get a lot more property damage, a lot more lives lost if we don't move on climate change. So, like I said, I'm very excited to hear about this feasibility study recommendation, and I hope that you guys move quickly on it. Thank you for your time.
And thank you for your comments. Anyone else call in, Missy?
That's all, Chair Mursky.
Okay, thank you. So we'll wait 10 more seconds, and if not, then we will close that and move on to our first presentation. Okay, let's move on. So we have a number of presentations tonight on community solar, and that is timely, I think, also given the comments. So Missy, do you want to introduce our first presenter, and we'll go from there?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me just move Jenny over. So our first presenter, we are lucky enough to have Jenny Heater from the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, who's going to talk to us a little bit about community solar across the nation. And then that'll be followed by a presentation looking at a community solar program that we have here in Michigan. And I believe, Jenny, are you with us now?
I am here.
Awesome. Okay, let me make you a presenter.
Okay,
You
great.
can share your screen.
I think I can do it now.
Great. Can you do
no.
see it? Okay.
No, it says host disabled participant screen share.
You are getting it now.
Okay. There we go. Great.
Take it away.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for having me today. It's a pleasure to learn about all of your backgrounds and what's going on in Ann Arbor. I was asked to present about national trends in community solar. We have looked at this area in terms of deployment trends and also subscription trends and energy burden reduction potential for community solar. This is a subset of data that NREL collects for the third annual time this year, and it's part of an ongoing project to inform community solar creation across the country. So I'm going to run through some slides, and then, yeah, happy to take Q&A after that. So the first piece that we look at is just where and how large projects are across the country. This map shows in the bubbles individual projects with project sizes from small to large. And then we also see just total capacity in the state shading. So you'll notice states like Florida, Minnesota, New York tend to have large amounts of installed capacity for community solar. Also Massachusetts, which is a little bit buried in the pink circles there as well. Some of the trends that I like to highlight on this slide are just differences in the state policies and how that impacts deployment. So some states have decided to cap their project sizes. You'll see in Minnesota that projects there are typically around 5 megawatts or going down to 2 megawatts because of provisions in their policy. However, we see in states that have not had a blanket-wide state policy, like Arkansas and Florida, utilities there are developing projects that are much larger in size, so going up to 80 megawatts in size, that are still a subscription-based and credit-based model, but not the smaller size projects like under 5 megawatts that some folks tend to think about when they think about community solar. So overall, across the country, as of the end of last year, there were about 3.2 gigawatts of capacity and more than 1,600 projects across the country. We have 39 states and Washington, D.C. covered, but you will obviously notice that, and we'll talk about this later, the deployment is pretty heavily concentrated in about 10 states. As I mentioned, NREL does gather data on projects from across the country. We work actually with the University of Minnesota on this project to scan for announcements of new projects, looking at utility websites for new projects that have posted, as well as in our states with a lot of deployment, there are frequently interconnection queues or other publicly available lists of community solar projects. So I wanted to pull the list of projects that we have for Michigan. As you guys probably know, there's not enabling legislation in Michigan. So these are projects that have been voluntarily developed by the utilities. So as of December of last year, there were 11 projects that we found in Michigan, installed between 2013 and 2019, about 7 megawatts of capacity overall, and a pretty diverse set of utilities developing these projects. So we do typically, in states with enabling policies, see that that enabling policy covers the investor-owned utilities and see a lot of deployment there. But our municipal utilities as well as cooperative utilities also tend to develop projects in some states that are typically smaller in size to serve their customers. When we look at trends over time, this is a market that continues to grow year to year. Cumulatively, capacity has grown by more than 120% year over year since 2010. We do, see this growth as basically a doubling on average year over year. I recently presented this and somebody asked me if we expect those trends to continue. NREL has not done a pure forecast of expected deployment, but I do have a slide later on that talks about state queues of interconnection queues for projects we expect to come online. In 2020, we had about 1,100 megawatts come online. So a lot of capacity coming online year to year, still overall a small chunk of the overall solar market. One of the trends we see in this space is that projects have become larger over time. This is not really captured in the visualizations here, but we are starting to see some of these very large 50 megawatt or larger community solar projects in recent years. That is happening in Florida and Arizona. Previous projects in Arkansas as well as Georgia has some quite large projects. So that is pulling some of our capacity numbers up on a year-to-year basis. When we look at average project capacities, though, across the country, they still are in that kind of 2 megawatt range in terms of project size. And some states have a size cap. Other states might just have provisions saying that the project has to be connected to the distribution system instead of the transmission system or something like that. So it's consideration for just how folks define community solar. I spoke a little bit about enabling legislation, but this is a high-level summary of across the country which states have this enabling legislation. This can take different forms. Some states are mandating community solar be offered by their regulated utilities. Other states have an approach that requires virtual net metering. So it may not require a certain megawatt of community solar capacity be installed in the state, but there is that enabling framework of virtual net metering that allows customers to receive bill credits from their community solar subscriptions. I don't think I put a slide in on this, but we also tend to see that most of these states, I think around 17 of these states, have some type of provision for low and moderate income access to community solar, whether that is a carve out where they're saying a certain percentage of a project or a certain percentage of the overall portfolio has to serve LMI customers, or some states have had targeted financial incentives for projects that include LMI subscribers, or in some cases there are states who have a selection process for community solar projects, and if there is an LMI component, that is weighted or given more points in that weighting criteria. So that is an area that we see a lot of interest in at the state level. When we think about deployment in states that have supportive policies or enabling legislation versus those that don't, the figure on the right there shows the voluntary participation states at about, I think it's about 1,200 megawatts, and then our states with enabling legislation total over 2,000 megawatts. There's a lot of nuance here. This is kind of the high level summary, but the voluntary states are really driven on a capacity basis by those large projects in Florida, Arkansas, Georgia, and Texas. Those 4 states cover about 80% of that voluntary participation bucket. So if you think about, Michigan would fall into that voluntary participation column at 7 megawatts, so pretty small compared to even those other voluntary states. So when we look at this market going forward, it's obviously very heavily driven by enabling frameworks and those large utility voluntary programs. So this data here shows from states where there are projects that have been approved in some way or another. That could be either through a mandated framework or, as in the case of Florida, approval by the Regulatory Commission for Florida Power and Light and Duke Energy to move forward with their projects. We're looking at, in the dark blue, the operational projects, and then the light blue, the planned projects. So takeaway here is that we're definitely continuing to see growth in this market. It still is pretty heavily focused on a handful of states. The largest growth on a megawatt basis we expect to be in Florida and New York. Florida as those utility programs roll out, and New York as a lot of projects that have been approved for incentives are starting to be interconnected. That's not to say that other states are not active in this space. Like we've seen a lot of activity in Oregon as they work through their rules and regulatory process. It's just a smaller program overall than we see in states like New York and even in Minnesota. Okay, so the last piece I want to cover in my presentation is the value that folks receive when they subscribe to community solar projects. This is something that NREL started to track for a lot of reasons, but one is to really get a grounding in, is community solar a market that can save people money by subscribing? We have seen in the past a lot of utility programs that are often called green pricing programs or adder programs where customers are paying 1 or 2 cents per kilowatt hour extra on their bill. And a certain number of customers are willing and wanting to do that, but we know that when products can save people money, there will be greater adoption and greater support for deploying renewable energy assets. So we have a lot of detail behind this. What we do is gather data on the subscription contracts that developers are using or utilities are using. If they are the ones subscribing customers, we can pull their rate tariff. For each tariff or subscriber contract that we have, we look at things like how many years the contract is for, how much and how the customer pays. So are they paying monthly? Are they paying annually? And then are there any escalation rates or things like that included? And then the last main piece is just how the customer is compensated for their generation. So in most cases, that's the retail rate that customers are compensated at, but in some cases, it may be more like a value of solar rate or some kind of custom rate that the utility has developed. So we use all that information to calculate the net present value of a residential subscription to community solar and track that over time. So this figure is showing in the dark blue the average net present value of a residential subscription. We've also done a lot of scenario analysis. So that's shown in the lighter blue there to vary things like discount rate, utility escalation rates, other things that maybe are a little bit more unknown, just to explore how sensitive these net present values are to those external factors or more things that are more unknown. So what you see here is that there's obviously a trend towards having a positive net present value for residential subscribers. In the earlier years, we did see a lot more projects that were not providing positive net present value. Some of these were smaller projects, so they're higher cost. And these are projects that were developed before some of the big virtual net metering programs began to roll out in Colorado, Minnesota, Massachusetts, and New York. So we do see those states as having value for customers. And as those states deploy more, we are starting to see that NPV come up for residential subscribers. So the next couple of slides are some of our new work focused on energy burden. And we wanted to really answer the question of how can community solar reduce the energy burden of low and moderate income consumers? We know that low and moderate income consumers spend more of their annual income on energy than other income groups. We have a lot of data at DOE and NREL to help us understand that framing. There's a Department of Energy lead tool, it's called, where you can explore energy burden by income group, by location. It's a really cool tool with a lot of data. It sounded like there were some data folks in this group. So if you haven't seen that, it is a pretty cool tool. But we wanted to layer into that, essentially not just understanding how much people are currently paying and what their current energy burden is, but then layering on what would that look like if a consumer in a different in a different income bracket were to subscribe to community solar and also subscribe to community solar with a low income adder, as is the case in Massachusetts. And then we'll also talk about Washington, DC. So there's a lot on this figure, but the key takeaways are in the blue bars. That's where customers are at now, what their energy burden percentages are now. And then in the orange, you're looking at how much lower does that get if you add community solar. And then in the green, it is how much you would be at with community solar with that low income adder. So a couple key takeaways for me for this is that energy burden is more than just electricity. So there are certain things that a community solar subscription will not address, which means it's really important to think about for community solar subscribers, what else could they be doing to address their energy consumption, whether that's weatherization or efficiency to lower that heating load typically. And then also if you focus on your lowest income bracket, so the 0 to 30% income bracket, your reduction on a percentage basis is just going to be much greater because just pure math of expenditures over income. So there really are, a lot of data layers underneath this, but really allows us to illustrate the point of our lowest income consumers need help the most, and thinking about ways to target programs or policies to reduce their energy burden, not just from community solar, but other energy needs. So I think actually, yeah, 2 more slides. So this is looking at the same data, but in a different framework. We wanted to really frame out how much an example lowest income person or household might be spending on energy, including electricity, gas, and fuel, and then looking at what are the reductions in those yellow bars that come from community solar and then from that low income adder. So you can see that overall for this modeled energy consumer, this person is paying about $1,100 a year. And then if you look at what their reduction is, it's about $400 a year. So purely just on an electricity basis, if we just look at electricity and not gas and fuel, there is quite a large reduction in terms of the amount of electricity bills that this consumer would have. Last example is one from Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. implemented a Solar for All program, which offers free community solar subscriptions to households below 80% of area median income. The subscriptions are designed to offset approximately 50% of electricity bills for those consumers. So when we look at this program, again in the blue, we see the energy burden kind of business as usual, and then adding in the Solar for All subscription and green, similar trend just based on the economics and what customers tend to pay. But that 0 to 30% income bracket sees the largest reduction, down to about 8.8%. But everybody is saving money if they are at 80% or lower of area median income. So that is the end of what I have today, and happy to answer questions on this or what else is happening with community solar across the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Commissioners, I'd like to open things up for any questions that you might have. Commissioner Overpeck and then Commissioner Cleavy.
Thanks. That was a great presentation. Really appreciate it. What I'm interested in is the low income adder. It sounds like you were saying or implying implicitly that there might be better savings if the money is put into energy efficiency. Is there a comparison between giving, essentially the low income adder for energy purchase or putting it into energy efficiency in the house or the dwelling?
Yeah, we have not done a comparison as part of this study. You certainly could do that and look at the cost of installing efficiency measures versus providing a community solar subscription. A lot of that will depend on like which energy efficiency measures you install, and are there existing state programs that provide money to do that or things like that. My main point was that, like, let's not do these things in isolation. So if you are offering a low income community solar program, don't just do that. Like, make sure that the house is efficient and weatherized so that you can really target deep energy burden reductions.
Thanks.
Commissioner Cleavy, then Commissioner Hookham.
Yeah, I was interested on what you thought of all these models. Which ones are at least most interesting for Michigan? What we're facing. I appreciate Washington D.C. models. It's one of the few things I've seen them able to come together on in Washington D.C. I've been in meetings in Lansing where DTE Energy has actually suggested that people who do energy efficiency on their house be charged more for their money because they are, quote, free riders. So it's hard for me to see a way where our investor-owned utilities are going to offer solar at below market rate, retail rate, to anybody in this state. So we have an uphill battle here. Where should Michigan, of all these different models, which ones really work well with investor-owned utilities? And have any of those investor-owned utilities actually done real community solar where subscribers are they're actually customers as opposed to blue chip stockholders? And are they actually passing on those dividends to those subscribers, i.e. ratepayers, in the form of lower below market retail rates for fossil fuels? Is that actually happening or not?
So it is happening, and it can happen in a couple different ways. So you have the Minnesota kind of model where, as also happening in Colorado with Xcel Energy, they are legislatively mandated to offer community solar and to compensate customers for the RECs associated with those projects. So when you do the math, customers in those states are saving money compared to just staying on their regular rate. That's kind of the legislatively mandated model, and you guys know more about Michigan context and what DTE or other utilities might push back against in terms of whether that is, a feasible pathway. The other model that we see is investor-owned utilities who are offering these programs voluntarily. So I mentioned Florida Power and Light a couple times. Their model is slightly different in that they are very large solar projects. They're nearly 80 megawatts in size, but they did work through I would say, pretty lengthy negotiation process with stakeholders to craft their program so that it does have a low income component to it. I think there's like 30 or 35 megawatts that are dedicated to low income consumers. I believe those consumers can never see their bill go up. There are provisions in there like that. And then for the rest of the capacity, I want to say customers are expected to save money after like 7 or 8 years. So it is a longer term investment from the customer perspective. But, if you think about the life of that subscription being 20 years and you start saving money year 7, you will save money overall, but there is that investment that customers need to make. So yeah, I would say those are the two models that we tend to see. There are variations, particularly with like municipal and co-op utilities, where they tend to have smaller projects and kind of want to pilot something out and see if their customers like it. And some of those projects were developed really before solar was more cost effective. So those customers may not be saving as much money or saving money at all, but the co-op has or Muni has, wanted to test out that approach.
Commissioner Hookham, I think you had raised your hand. Is that correct?
Yep, thanks, John. And thanks, Jenny, for your presentation, and to NREL for all the things you do for us to help us understand renewables and integration and so forth. The state of Michigan is working on distributed energy in terms of making it more accessible, and I suspect that we're going to see some rules changing in that favor. If a city municipality had say a 24 megawatt solar project they were looking at and wanted to go community solar based from a concept point of view, could you just speak briefly on how that's being facilitated financially? Or is it municipal bonds being used? Have you seen anything creative in terms of keeping the debt service and cost of those kinds of projects down so that the community solar subscription fees can also be lowered?
That is a great question and not one that we have analyzed. So you're saying this 24 megawatt project would be owned by the city, or yeah, okay. So yeah, I definitely am not a municipal finance expert, but we do have folks like that at NREL. So if you want to send me a follow-up, I'd be happy to connect you with some other folks. My understanding is that there are ways to cities have to finance projects in a more cost-effective way, but the challenge is with getting the solar investment tax credit and finding a way to essentially that's like the price to beat, right? So that's kind of my high level understanding, but I don't know if there are things beyond bonds or kind of the standard set of mechanisms for cities to use.
Yep, fair enough. The tax credit's really critical, and if the city could find a way to structure that so that it would be financeable in a community solar environment, I think there's projects out there that could be worked that way. I think one of our other public speakers had a question on that. So thank you for your comments. Appreciate them.
Commissioner Overpeck, you had a question again?
No, just a point about this. I mean, there are, when the University of Michigan was looking into this, we have a couple of economists in the school who did a study, and they worked closely with folks at MIT who were already doing this, buying power purchase agreements. And of course, that's a way to fund a for-profit power developer, solar developer, who can then take advantage of tax credits that a university, it's nonprofit, can't. So that's an advantage. Of course, you have to pay something to that developer, and then you have to pay the debt unless you have some magical way to grow money on a tree or something like that. So that's a possibility. The thing that they also uncovered, however, is that the cost of generating solar up here in Michigan is a lot more expensive than doing it in Florida or Texas or Tennessee or anywhere down, further south, just because we don't get enough sunshine. And when we do get sunshine in the winter, the sun's at a lower angle, and that cuts it down too. So what you're asking, I think, Chuck, is you can figure it out, and then you could do an RFP and see what you get. But then the other thing that became an obstacle was that unless you own the transmission, you're going to pay for the transmission too. And so DTE in this case would have us, have a choke point on our ability to get that energy from the landfill or wherever it was to the customer. So all this adds up, and my guess is it adds up to too much. And that's probably why, and I have a funny feeling Missy has thought it's all through. That's probably why we're thinking of your own municipal power. And then we own the lines, we own everything. But then still, is solar cheap enough to generate a good deal for us at this high latitude? And I don't know the answer, that's why I'm here. But I'm sure we could get the answer, right, Missy?
Commissioner Cleavy, did you have another question? Or
Yeah, I just have a comment to Chuck's point and also Jonathan's also. I mean, the PURPA rates for third-party finance are embarrassingly low, and every rate case that I see that comes out of Lansing, they're asking for it to go lower. So, generating to the utilities at somewhere between 3 and 5 cents a kilowatt hour, as opposed to building it and using it ourselves and offsetting electricity at 15 cents a kilowatt hour is a totally different situation. So municipals that do this, they're replacing expensive energy with this at 15 cents a kilowatt hour. But for us to go float bonds and get in the game of building power and selling it on the open market to DTE for under PURPA rules, I defy any economist, even a University of Michigan economist, to figure out where the sweet spot is in that kind of a deal, even with a 25-year lifespan on the power. So, yeah, I mean, we're kind of stuck. We're either we convince you DTE Energy to sell us green power at a reasonable rate, or we subsidize that power and give it to lower-income people, or we figure out another alternative. Municipalization has been posted as one alternative. Hopefully, we can find others that work even better. But you know, we're stuck between a rock and a hard place right now. It seems to me on this whole issue. So I'm looking forward to figuring it out.
Thanks, Mark. Anyone else? We have another presenter on the topic, and so we might, I mean, I think Missy also is going to make some comments too, possibly. I think maybe we'll move on to the next presentation, which is, I think, more Michigan centric. Jenny, you're certainly welcome to stay on, and maybe there's some follow-up questions that relate to the material that you presented that come up later in the evening. Missy, do you want to present our next presenter? I see that John is waiting in the wings.
Yeah, hi. Hi, John. Thank you for joining us today. Next, we have John Finch, who actually Carleen gets credit for really identifying John as a speaker to talk to us a little bit about what's happening locally here in Michigan with some community solar. And so I'm going to attempt, probably poorly, if anyone can help me make sure you get audio when I play this video for John. Does anyone know the secret of Zoom audio playing through YouTube? I'm going to assume you don't, hearing that. Okay, so this may not work. If not, I will drop it. Here we go. We're going to try. Yeah. Can you see it? Okay, you can't hear it or see it.
We can't.
Okay.
Missy, when you shared, did you select share system audio when you shared your screen? That is.
Yeah, yes, I knew that was the thing to do. You are the best. This is why Thea is. Now let me try. Ready?
Thank you, Missy.
You bet.
I'm going to give you a B+ on the AV stuff. Okay. Okay. Yeah, A-, B+, somewhere in there. So thanks. I was going to say hello to Jenny. We are a part of the National Community Solar Partnership, and we've been the recipients of a couple technical support grants, and it's been a great experience working with Jenny and others across the nation with this opportunity with NREL and the DOE and so forth. I think one of my takeaways, Jenny, from this, and you probably have the same one, is that no two community solar projects are the same. They're all very different, and they're all peculiar for a number of reasons. And I see some experts on this call that I recognize, Chuck Holcomb and Mark Cleavy among them, and that we have all kinds of different situations within our communities as to what the regulations are and the policies are regarding energy, whether it's where it comes from the utilities, whether or not you yourself can self-generate, where you can locate it, on and on and on and on. So community solar is really about threading a pretty tight needle to get that right. And I'll just tell you a little bit about our own experience doing this, and then we can have a little bit of conversation about it. I think a couple of my major takeaways from this, and you saw that our hard work eventually paid off. The project is in the ground. It's producing electrons. It's working pretty well. We were recognized by a large trade association in the state as having the project of the year in 2019. We actually beat out a large wind farm project. So it's a little bit of a David and Goliath story. Our project is modest in its size. It's only 345 kilowatts. But we got this going 5, 6, 7 years ago now. And at that time, that was a relatively good sized project. And moreover, it was a project that could fit on the particular site where we're located. You saw how green that site is. It even looks prettier today because as part of our building out this solar project, we included habitat restoration. We have pollinators and native grasses that we planted there. And it's taken us few years to get ahead of the invasives and the weeds. But now I'm proud to say if you go out there today, you're going to see black-eyed Susans and milkweed and all kinds of forbs and grasses. It's quite beautiful, and we're very pleased about that. And there's actually an upside to planting this kind of vegetation around solar panels, and that upside is that we don't have to mow that site. We don't have to get in there and cut grass because these plants go to a certain height. They're not affecting at all the panels productions, and they take care of themselves. So it has a kind of a twofer to it. And then I would add a threefer to it, if I might. The site we're located in East Lansing, and some of you may be from East Lansing or know it. I guess there's a university there somewhere as well. I actually went there. My son went to University of Michigan. I worked at University of Michigan, so we're all one happy family. That's actually a capped landfill. It's a closed landfill that we located the project on. So it's a site that's never going to have any redevelopment use. You're never going to put a Tim Hortons on that site. You're never going to put a daycare center on that site. And it happens to be wonderfully proximate to distribution lines of the Board of Water and Light. They were an important partner of ours. Actually, Chuck, so you know, right in that corridor, on our side of the street, BWL has distribution line. On the other side of the street, Consumers Energy has a distribution line. So locating community solar, I think, is an interesting exercise in that I think that we can identify among all of our communities in the state of Michigan, legacy industrial sites, legacy mining sites, legacy dumps that could be good candidates for community solar, because community solar is, like I said, ours is 345 kilowatts, which is small. 1 to 5 megawatts, I think, is a good guesstimate to say in terms of what a community solar project might be, how big that would be. And roughly speaking, if it's a relatively intact site, you can get about 1 megawatt on 5 acres, 6 acres of property. So in our case, we're taking up a couple acres out of a 24-acre site that is kind of lightly used by the community for hiking and walking your dog and doing things like that. And like I said, we're right there on the distribution line. So we're local, and that helps to supply some grid services as well. That happens to be a distribution line, a circuit that has capacity. So one of the challenges of locating solar, especially the big stuff, and again, Chuck knows this, is where you put it, because the transmission and the distribution grid might look the same from standing on the street looking up at it, but it isn't the same in terms of how it's functioning. There's capacity in places and there's congestion in other places, and you don't necessarily know where the best place is to hook a project up to. So we had all kinds of those technical hurdles to get through, like any solar project does. Identifying this, securing the site, identifying the site, working with the local utility if they'll be willing to let us put those electrons on the grid, doing interconnection study. In our case, because we're on a landfill, doing all kinds of environmental impact studies, stormwater studies, on and on and on and on. And then you have another conundrum with community solar. That's the community. So we have 150 participants in this project. That's 150 subscriptions, participation I have to keep track of and make sure that people are getting their money back out of the project, getting the credits on their bill. So there's a lot of churn there. There's a lot of things to take care of and pay attention to. And it isn't something that you do lightly. We did it lightly. We just kind of said, hell yes, we can whoop the British. And we went in there and Took us 5 years, but we actually were able to pull it off. But it is a learned skill, and there's a number of other community solar projects around the state as well. And each one of those, I think, informs the next one in terms of what you've learned works and what you've learned doesn't particularly work. I know that Ann Arbor has the project that you've queued up with DTE and the idea that it'll be some community solar there, as I understand it, and some of it will be just generation that goes to the utility. But I can't emphasize enough that if you're going to be thinking about doing true community solar, you have to do 3 things really well and really early. You have to line up your conversations with the incumbent utility, because like it or not, you're going to have to put the power on their wires. Although there is a model, and Jenny knows about this, some work we've been doing about there might be an alternative model to doing that, but I won't go into that right now. So you need to work with the local utility. You need to figure out who's got the land. I think the best candidates for land are local units of government. They have brownfields that are sitting there underutilized. We can put solar on those sites. Thirdly, then you have to work with your community and figure out what they want and what they don't want. We spent a lot of time in front of community forums, and I was naive enough to think community solar, it's like a warm puppy. Who's going to be against community solar, right? But we took some shots in these community meetings. We listened to people who were not happy about the idea, who were questioning the wisdom of doing this. We're concerned about the city getting involved with this and perhaps 10, 20 years from now being stuck with a mess that they have to clean up on city property. So those are real 3 important pieces you have to get right. Now, we did this without the benefit of any kind of statute to back us up or provide any kind of blocking. Other states, and Jenny's slide presentation showed you that, other states are going gangbusters. Minnesota, I think, has something like 450, last time I looked, megawatts of community solar. 450 megawatts of community solar. We have, and this is a generous guess, 2 megawatts, maybe 4 megawatts, somewhere in there. We've got Marquette, we've got Lawrence has got a small project, Cherryland Consumers has a couple, we've got one, and then you're about done. So if people ask you, does enabling legislation make a difference in energy policy? I would say, hell yes, it does. It makes a big difference. And so right now there's a coalition called My Community Solar Alliance, and I can drop the URL in the chat, although I don't see the chat here. But nonetheless, this is a group of a number of organizations and folks that are pushing the adoption of a couple bills that right now are within our state legislature that would do just that. They would make community solar a carve out among this kind of crazy energy world. So it's not rooftop, it's not utility scale, it's something else. And this carve out would provide some definitions and some parameters and some expectations of the utilities so that more of this can be adopted. And I just would encourage you, I know certainly one of your representatives, Robbie, I know him pretty well. I'm sure he's on board with this, but you may have others where you are or have contacts with those folks to encourage them to take a look at these bills and support these bills. I think they're pretty good. And what's nice about being Michigan is that we're almost never first in when it comes to energy innovation type stuff. We kind of hang back as good Midwesterners and wait for somebody else to make the mistakes and do the hard work. And that bill is based on a lot of good community solar bills that are elsewhere in the country, Colorado, Minnesota, New York, Illinois. And I think we've got a pretty tight argument right there with our bill. So I'm going to pause, Missy, and you tell me what I whiffed on that I should have mentioned or what folks might be most interested in hearing more about.
I don't think you whiffed on anything. I think, Chair Mursky, should we just go to questions?
Yes, can we open things up for questions then for John Kinich? Go ahead, Chuck.
John, great presentation as normal. Love working with you. You guys are great. Probably if I were to say one thing missing, the only thing really would be the alignment of community solar and its scalability relative to carbon reduction, right? I mean, you could put a lot of solar on people's roofs across our community, and not that there's anything wrong with that, but when you start getting reductions in carbon emissions, you really start looking at scalability, and the more you can build a scalable community infrastructure that can be taken advantage of by, LMIs all the way through people who can't build solar on their property because of shading, whatever it might be, now you're starting to build that mindset that we can do some differentiating with respect to greenhouse gases. And I know you and I are working on larger scale stuff together, but that's the one potential additionality, maybe you call it, for community solar that's a benefit. Maybe you could comment on that brief.
Yeah, that's a great observation, Chuck. What this makes me think is this. We have a lot of cities around the country, but let's pick on Michigan, in which councils, mayors, others have put forward ambitious goals, whether it's 100% renewables to power the city, or it's a net zero goal of some kind, or becoming carbon neutral by a certain date. And that's great, because that does set a goal that does then push us to figure out ways to make these kinds of things happen. I think the challenge with those is oftentimes with people is like, well, what do we do then? Do we buy SRECs from Texas to get ourselves there? And I think what's nice about something like community solar is that it's, kind of like a Goldilocks situation. It's not too big, it's not too little, it's kind of just right. That a community can figure out how to do those kinds of projects together. It can be a tangible action on their part to reduce carbon, to green up the grid, do any number of things like that. And you can be really hands-on with it. I mean, it takes a village, it takes a community to make this kind of thing happen, because we had to get all kinds of things passed within city government to even make this happen, right? We had to change the way things were done within government to make this kind of thing happen. And that, if you're just relying on some go-getting smallish kind of nonprofits to make this happen, you're probably hanging back too much. A conversation I've had a lot with utilities around the state, and they tended not to be the investor-owned utilities. They've tended to be more the municipalities or the cooperatives, the smaller guys, if you will, where I've come to them and presented to them, hey, let's do a community solar park in your neck of the woods. I won't name any cities, Holland. And what they say to me, Holland, is they say, well, that's a good idea, Holland, but nobody from my community is coming to me to say they want it. You're saying it's a good idea, but I'm not hearing from my community. So commissions like you guys, what you can be doing is like, hey, community, I know this has already happened in Ann Arbor, but you got to make noise. You got to have conversations with your utility and your civic leaders, because if it's not coming from the community, it probably isn't going to get done.
Commissioner Kerber.
Yes, I was going to say, John, that, I, as a solar developer, I have so many people quite regularly come to me with property that they would like to develop some form of revenue stream, if you will, or in the case of community solar. And of course, they're all, in my case, all in DTE territory. And I have to tell them that because of the monopoly control over energy in Southeast Michigan, that DTE will show no interest in that solar being developed and being available for other people. So they're always disappointed, and they're always scratching their heads in disbelief. But am I wrong?
No, you are right. And again, I'll track back to those House bills that are currently in committee, and I can always follow up with you, Missy, later on and give folks the link to all that so they can see them themselves. Those bills force the hand of the investor-owned utilities to make community solar happen. Period. Right. They give the requirements of it, they define it, and they make it a thing. And one of the ways I think that we can, make it happen is to try to kind of level set, if you will, some of the costs around all this. Chuck mentioned LMI. I think it's great work that NREL is pushing in terms of looking at adders when it comes to LMI, or when you get to a certain point and you're plateauing with the energy efficiency that you're driving within your community. And then if you can add solar to that, then you've got even more potential for savings for those customers. You certainly have a hedge against the future. So if you can provide a solar price point for somebody that's good for the next 10, 15 years against rate increases over the next 10, 15 years, that's building community wealth in my estimation, and a good thing to do. But you're absolutely right. One of the foibles of Michigan, for the most part, is that your destiny is determined by your incumbent utility. If you're in DTE's territory, you live by DTE's rules. You're in consumers territory, you live by their rules. If you're in a muni or a cooperative, different set of rules there as well. You know, we only have in our state 10% of electric choice, so to speak, and that queue is around the block and then down the street and across the state for entities lining up wanting to take advantage of that. So we really don't have choice.
Commissioner Cleavy.
John, welcome. John serves with me on GLREA's board of directors, and we're really happy to have him on board and be part of that. John, I wonder if you could speak for a minute about, you raised the question of choice, and I guess what I see is if there's a potential confluence between community choice aggregation or electric choice and community solar, if we merge these two things together, could bypass the utility intransigence on this stuff, and create a market for community solar that is beyond just the municipals where it's being put in. Do you see such a confluence as a possibility? I mean, with community choice 2.2 is, it might just crack that electric choice law open.
Yeah, and I know that you and Missy, Mark, and we've certainly talked about this in GLREA as well, about community choice aggregation. I mean, Ohio has something like it, right? Something along those lines. It's a legislative fix, as I see it. I mean, I don't know what can be done within the PUC, within the Michigan Public Service Commission, in terms of rulemaking to make something like that happen. I don't see what local government can do to make that happen. Maybe there's some moves that local government can do. It certainly seems that that's in statute, and in order to fix it, we would need to amend the statute. Could the utilities agree to that on their own and let it happen as part of their IRP, for example? Maybe. Will they? I don't know. But you're right. I mean, I think some of these, I guess what I would just step back and say is that the change in the utility industry, and Chuck knows this better than I do because he's been in there for a long time. You do too, Mark. The change in the last couple of years in the utility industry, to my mind, is equivalent to what happened in the previous 20 in terms of what's going on, with batteries coming on and thinking about DERs and thinking about the utility shifting its business model to perhaps being more providing a bunch of services and other kinds of supports to the grid and making it all kind of work, because somebody's got to make it work because it's complicated, and less thinking about selling commodity to you. And I just think whatever was true 2 years ago isn't going to be true 2 years from now. But I'm not sure what that 2 years from now looks like. But it's going to be more change.
Commissioner George.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Firstly, I want to thank you, John, for your presentation. It was nice to bring it down to more of a Michigan-focused approach. My question, I feel, just a quick aside, we do a lot of conversation in this commission about policy and policies that we would like to do. And then we have the issue that we run into. There's a party that controls our legislature that is very difficult to work with and is going to prevent us from doing a lot of these policies. So you mentioned those bills that are in committee right now. And more broadly speaking, my question is both narrow and broad. Firstly, do those bills in committee have any chance of being, I don't know if you've been following them, being enacted this legislative session, or if anybody else has an answer to that. And two, more broadly, if those bills are not enacted, what is the path forward under current law for community solar?
Okay, second one first. So roughly every 8 years or so, we open up our energy law and do something with it. So 2008, and then we had an update 2000. 2012 was whenever the one, or 16, whenever it was, 2016 maybe, perhaps 2016. Yeah, so 2008, 2016. So we're kind of due again, you know, and that's going to be a thing, and there'll be all kinds of wrangling and all kinds of, you know, discussions and things will go on. And I'm just going to bet that if that law is opened up again, that we're going to see some really dramatic changes in what the legislation is going to say about what our energy policy should be. I mean, to give, you know, credit, I mean, consumers where Chuck is, you know, those guys are blasting through about this 20% goal of having renewables as part of their portfolio. They're gunning for 40, 50. I mean, I think at least 40, maybe even beyond that. I mean, and every time I tune into the news about consumers, they go from saying we're going to put in 4 gigawatts to 5 gigawatts to 6 gigawatts to 8 gigawatts. And that is an amazing, you know, exponential growth in solar alone that consumers is intending. So I think keeping an eye on that is an important thing. And I'm just going to say about the community solar bill itself, I've been involved with the back end of that. I helped provide some of the technical language and, you know, reviewing some of what was put into it. Like I said, I worked with a group of good people that learned from other states. And most recently, and again, this is a modest contribution, I hope it makes a difference. We've had state legislators out at our East Lansing Community Solar Park because we're not too far from the Capitol. And I've walked people around and pointed things out and explained it to them and showed them the black-eyed Susans. And we even had deer one day running around the site. And in terms of acceptance, interest, and seemingly being positive, it was bipartisan. So it wasn't just the Dems that were getting their heads around this and thinking it seemed like it was an okay thing. Now, what happens when the rubber meets the pavement? I don't know. But at least I think that we're helping people get their heads around what it is. I think, you know, if you don't see something, can't see it, touch it, taste it, walk around in it, it's pretty abstract. And community solar, like I said, sounds like a warm puppy, but it's really not a warm puppy. It's something much more serious and much more complex than that. So I hope that, you know, we're going to continue this push coming into the fall and that we may see something come out of that committee that's positive, and fingers crossed.
Just a couple of quick follow-ups there, Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind. So on the reopening of the energy code that you mentioned, I'm a little familiar with what happened in 2016. So you're expecting that to happen 2022, 2023?
Well, I mean, if looking backwards can provide any trends, then maybe there may be an appetite again for opening it up and taking a look at it. And there were some substantial changes from the 2008 to the 2016. One of the important changes was that the municipals that previously were obligated to have energy efficiency as part of their utility mix and part of their power mix, you know, treating energy efficiency as a source of power, a negawatt, if you will. The 2016 law allows them for, at the end of this calendar year, to opt out of having any obligation to do energy efficiency programs anymore for their customers. So, and a number of those utilities may in fact just do that. So those incentives, those rebates, those kinds of things that they're have in place for residents and commercial may simply go away because that utility has decided they don't want to do it anymore, and they're not under the aegis anymore of the Michigan Public Service Commission, and thus not obligated to do that.
Gotcha. So I'll take that to my question. You know, earliest that might be complete, you know, maybe sometime late next year, just so that the commission is aware of this broader timeline that we need to work with as we're considering other options. And so far as the second part about, you know, the current legislation that's in committee saying everything goes well and swimmingly and things move out of the House and they get into the Senate, you know, that probably wouldn't be enacted until probably mid of next year, at assuming everything goes well.
I think that's probably a decent timeline to provide to put on this. Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that. And I just would say in terms of, you know, opening up the energy legislation, let's not forget the legislators are elected to office to legislate, to write bills and to write policy and do those kinds of things. So maybe they're just going to get itchy fingers in a couple more years and want to get back into that and do something substantial.
Thank you.
Two brief comments from my side, maybe just one actually. There was a webinar today sponsored by the 2030 District about the energy code updates. That's actually an administrative process. It's been already initiated. The dates for all the steps past the one that we have completed so far are all TBD, but the projection is that that process would likely be completed by the end of 2022. Obviously, go ahead, John, did you want to say something?
No, go ahead. You go ahead.
Obviously, I think everything that John said is right, but it's a big question mark as far as change in the legislation. I mean, that could happen in a matter of months, and that could also be dragged out to a matter of years. And obviously, a lot of different parties, potentially even ourselves included, will have influence on that process, including also through political contributions and lots of other things. So I think it's pretty hard to put any kind of timeline on enabling legislation. What I'd like to do is, Bridget has a question or comment, and then I'd like to move on to Missy and hear a little bit about projects locally. So Bridget, I'll let you go first, and then of course we can go back and rehash anything that Jenny or John said after also Missy talks. So go ahead, Bridget.
Thanks. John, you were talking about the two bills, which I'm assuming are about enabling community solar, as well as it sounds like other things. Does anybody know where DTE stands on those? If anybody's approached them to find out if they support them, oppose them, has anybody tried working with them?
Well, these carve-outs for community solar are pretty specific to that. So they're not about a lot of other kind of renewable energy issues. So they're pretty specific to that. Two, from what I've heard from the Alliance, and that's not my day-to-day job. So we're part of this Alliance and we've helped out with them, but I'm not government relations. I'm not in the State House. I don't spend all my time with this particular issue or paying attention to it. But I think probably the assumption is that the utilities are probably going to be resistant to it. They're, for any number of reasons. One of the potential issues is that they're suggesting that at least half of whatever gets built that's called community solar is built by third parties, not the utilities themselves. Now, in the case of consumers, they're already kind of doing that themselves based upon their own IRP, but I'm not sure we can say that about the other IOUs in the state. I think the expectation is that the utilities are probably not going to be real excited about this or supportive of it. That may change, but I think that's kind of the word on the street.
Missy, can we hand things over to you? You have, I think, some certainly comments and maybe slides prepared to talk about what's happening locally. And I would at least personally appreciate you addressing some of the questions that Ken Garber addressed. And also, I'm at least personally also interested in all these things are interesting from my perspective about what's going on locally and in the state of Michigan, but without enabling legislation, what it seems to me it comes down to is a negotiation between whoever wants to put in a community solar project and the investor-owned utility. And of course, there are a lot of other elements, as John talked about, talking to the community and everything else. But the eye of the needle that the project has to get through is negotiations with the IOU. And so I'd be interested in you commenting on the status of the project and what some of the peculiarities are and limitations in terms of negotiating positions we've encountered So I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Chair Mursky. And I don't have slides. I'm happy to put them together and to circulate for folk, but I thought I would actually just walk through the project one more time. It's evolving very fast. So if I put together slides and even change today in good ways as we're moving forward. So to kind of ground the conversation, first and foremost, I want to say that the city is in support of community solar legislation. It's something that we've asked our city lobbyists to work on. It's something that once it's reintroduced and once we can get movement, we plan to testify to the extent that we can and coordinating with other municipalities that also want that. And I think that gets to what Jenny was sharing about our state right now is really a voluntary state, right? Because we don't have requirements around community solar. So acknowledging that we're a voluntary state, we, as you know, intervened in the voluntary green pricing program and saw that as a mechanism to do a lot of things, one of which was get movement on community solar. And in the settlement that we received, we did get that. And so I don't know if folks caught this when Jenny was talking about the different types of community solar. There are direct offtake where you're taking the energy, but that actually doesn't happen a whole lot. In most of these cases, it is a community asset in which that energy is going onto the grid and then it's being distributed and you get a credit like virtual net metering for that system itself. It's not behind the meter like the solar that's on my roof right now, flowing in and then excess goes elsewhere. So we wanted to move forward with this project for numerous reasons. One, transferability, right? We wanted to demonstrate that community solar is possible. We wanted to get it through the VGP program because we want it. And we know that our public has asked for it a number of times. And we knew that we couldn't require DT to do this. And so the voluntary pricing program was the mechanism by which we did it. And what we did was we had kind of been looking at the landfill for a long time saying, what are we going to do with this asset? And we're not going to develop it. And forgive me, there is a storm moving through, as many of you I think know. So sorry for any background noise. We looked at that asset and we said, this would be a good place. We're really interested in seeing what is potential here for a solar asset. We don't have behind the meter solar on site to take that off. So we would have to inject that energy into the grid. And so we started kind of inquiring about this. And in preliminary discussions before we intervened in the VGP program, we talked to DTE about it and realized that there's actually two lines running. There's DTE's line, their transmission line, and then they also have the MISO line not far away. So that's good news because that meant there were two possible points of interjecting that power into the system. And we had done some preliminary analysis and we saw this to be a pretty decent size project. And we brought it to DT, and the first time there wasn't a lot of interest. The second time we brought it through the regulatory process, and there was a lot of interest in that happening. Surprise, surprise. And what we ended up doing was an interconnection study to DTE's system, because that is, number one, a lot cheaper and a lot faster. And Chuck can talk about the MISO grid connection and how long of a delay it is to get onto MISO. So we'd have to get in the queue, right? Because you first in line is who's going to interject into that system first. So we wanted to understand if DTE's lines that were there had any capacity, and if so, would we need to do any updates to those grids, to that grid itself to be able to take the power that we'd projected. And we had done a preliminary study showing about somewhere between 20 and 24 megawatts, kind of depending candidly on floating solar and its viability on the project. That's a lot of power to interject at a site. And what we found through the very first interconnection study that we did, which anyone would have to do, any developer has to do an interconnection study, was that DTE's grid could take it with some upgrades. Not massive upgrades, but some notable upgrades. That's good news, number one. It meant the project was viable and we didn't have to wait 3 years plus in the MISO queue. So good news, kind of step one. Then we began to analyze, okay, how are we going to get this project actually moving forward? So I recognize we're having a conversation around municipalization, but let's start with where we are right now. We don't own poles and wires. So I can build a system and I can't move the power. I can't use it on site. So that's not a super viable project for us to invest $30 million to not be able to offtake that energy. So we negotiated with DTE and said, we want to do this as a community solar project in which the city of Ann Arbor is the anchor tenant. And by that, I mean we are last in line. So we want to open this up for subscriptions, and we're negotiating, and right now we have agreement, we're working out the details, but agreement that what would happen is people can subscribe to this in one of two ways. You can subscribe just for a certain dollar amount. You can say, I just want like $10 equivalent offset from that system. Or you could subscribe and say, I want 100% of my usage to be from this. And then you would pay a levelized cost of energy, which is basically the cost to build the system. Your percentage would be what you're billed. And then you get the credit based on how that energy sells on the market, right? So you do get the credit on your bill. So this was important because it is that is a model of community solar that exists within the system. So you're getting the benefit, but maybe you just can't have it on your roof, right? You subscribe in that way. We also asked for an LMI program offering. So we're still designing what that would look like so that we will have a carve out for low and moderate income households to be able to subscribe at a discounted rate for that program. And then the City of Ann Arbor agrees to take whatever is not subscribed for. So one of the nice things about the size of this project, if it does come in at that 20 to 24 megawatts, municipal operations today is about 24 megawatts. So we could subscribe and technically have that match city load. We don't expect that to be the case though. We expect that we'll actually not get a lot of the project, and I want that to be true. Excuse me, I actually want us to subscribe the whole thing and then to use the city's demand to go and send the next build out of a program and an asset. So just last few things to kind of share broadly about this. The timeline is really important. We are hoping to get an RFP out in weeks, and I mean that in like 3 weeks, hitting the street, so we can actually have developers bid on this project and know a cost to come back to council. This is really important. One, with our climate goals, we need to get assets online fast, and this is one way to do that. Number two, we're going to safe harbor assets, which means we're going to secure the 26% federal tax incentive. And that's going to make this project that much cheaper and more viable to move forward. And if we are talking, we don't have a final cost, so any number we throw around really is just that. But you know, if you're talking anything in a million, a 26% reduction in that is really significant. So that'll help make the asset that much more viable and useful for other people to subscribe. There will be a third party that builds, hence why we're going out to RFP. So it's not that we're going to build this or DTE is going to build this. And I'm trying to think what else. I think those are sort of the main points. So we can't do a PPA in the traditional sense. Like I can't have someone else just go build this asset. They would have to use DTE's infrastructure anyway. And so we'd have to work with DTE on this project. We just cut out the middle folk. We just went directly to the source to make this happen. So DTE is now required per our regulators, the Michigan Public Service Commission, to move this project forward in good faith. We have the option of walking away if the price tag comes back too high and is something that we don't want to develop, but this has to move forward in good faith. Is that helpful?
Thanks, Missy.
Yeah.
I'd like to open things up for comment and questions again, not just for Missy, but for anyone else, including for each other. Peck.
Hi, Missy. I don't know if I got it, and I don't know if you have the answer, but how does this compare? How will the cost compare to DTE's green power, My Green Power plan?
Yeah, so to be determined for two reasons. One is in that settlement that we intervened in, we also negotiated a lower rate for the My Green Power program. So DT still has to file with the Michigan Public Service Commission what their new rates will be based on some merging of different asset classes, which Douglas Jester gets all the credit for figuring this out for those in this landscape. You know, Douglas, he's brilliant. So to be determined. What is different in this is you're not just paying a premium for an asset, you're also getting the credit of that asset, and that credit will be real-time MISO markets. So whatever that energy sells for, it'll be, we're still negotiating this, likely a monthly average cost because the energy sells on the market. Whatever it sells for on the market, you get the credit back on your bill. So the premium will be the subscription, subtracting what that energy sells for on the market for the renewable portions.
Yeah, but do you really think people will subscribe? I mean, because it's almost, I have a PhD and I can't figure out what you're saying.
I do think people will subscribe to this. We already have a number of tenants or folks who are ready to come in and subscribe for a certain offset. This is pretty common in kind of businesses, especially those with clean energy goals. We've been talking to folks like AAPS, the University of Michigan, Pittsfield Township, and others who have these goals and objectives. And this is a local generation project that allows them to have the security to know a certain percentage of their emissions are offset.
Okay, but still, they don't know how much they're going to pay for it.
We'll know as soon as we get the bids back. Like that will be determined. It's just we don't have costing, right? People haven't bid to build the project.
Okay, then we'll know. Okay.
Yeah, then we'll know.
All right, so I'll just wait.
Missy, if
I support it.
If I can add to what you just said, if the new energy code with the zero code appendix is adopted by the state of Michigan, there would be the possibility of Ann Arbor adopting the zero code. And with the zero code, you have to offset energy use through a number of different means. And I believe, Missy, correct me if I'm wrong, that that would be most likely a source of demand for community solar from this site, correct?
Could be a demand, certainly from that site. I think our initial eyes are on bigger users that are, again, like us and Pittsfield Township, other municipalities in the region. Those are kind of Google, maybe, others who have the goals and would like to be giving dollars to the local economy.
Right. Commissioner Cleavy, then Commissioner George, I should say, and then Carolyn.
So just a couple of points. One is my home in Harbor Springs, I have 100% solar from the Voluntary Green Pricing Program up there, and it works incredibly smoothly. Because we went 100%, but they actually took some other things off the bill, and it's worked out to be essentially a wash. So once it gets moving, it's fairly good. But there was a glitch, and I don't know how you guys plan to deal with this glitch or not. Some people have solar on their buildings, and they're grandfathered in on full net metering. And it's not clear to me if I went or someone went and signed up for the Voluntary Green Pricing Program and they had solar on their building, how that relationship would work out. Would they have to give up the full net metering and then get money back based on what they put into the grid at the rate of the negotiated VGP rate, or would they have two separate rates? Or it's not clear to me how that would work. And you can answer me offline if on this issue, but it's definitely something that's going to come up in Ann Arbor. And the other issue is if you're going to be issuing an RFP. We had a wonderful presentation this week at GLREA on low carbon solar, and it's kind of disturbing that Chinese solar, you get a 7-year payback on finances, but it's a 45-year payback on emissions reduction because they use coal to make the solar. And so, whether or not low carbon solar is required in your RFP or not, it's worth thinking about. Thanks.
Just to the first question quickly, would say that people have the option of subscribing in different ways. At least that's how we have two journeys. So if you had, I'll use my house, right? Most of our energy use is offset through the system that we have, but I could subscribe for 5% because I know that roughly 5% of mine is still pulling from the grid. So I could subscribe to just a percentage load. I don't think we would be capable, and I don't think we'd want to get into a really conflated billing system, acknowledging that might get tricky.
So the meter what we put into the meter under net metering would still go back to DTE, but we're buying voluntary green power, I guess, from DTE. It'll be interesting to see how it's worked out.
Happy to take that offline too to more fully understand. Yeah.
Commissioner George.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Missy, so I've got a couple of questions for you. As someone that has not had the ability to study intensively like Mark and Chuck and some of the others on this, some of what you said kind of went over my head. So I just wanted a couple of quick clarifying questions. So you mentioned, obviously, the city is pursuing this the solar project. And the main reason that the city can't do it on its own in the context of, some folks have mentioned municipalization is because you mentioned, I believe, the wires, right? And the transmission and the battery storage. Is that a correct understanding of that?
Yeah, if we generate that power, we have to move that power to a place that could use it. And so we would need the poles and the wires to be able to do that, to transmit it to ourselves. And then if we ever had to interject it into DTE's grid, we'd have to have their agreement to put it on to their grid. We can't just generate and put it on their system.
Okay. And I guess, within that, you mentioned that this solar grid would power, I believe, would provide all the city's needs on paper, would meet that number that you mentioned. Has there been any conversation about, trying to use that power and just channel it in almost like a scaled down municipalization, as the city is the primary purchaser of the power and using and purchasing lines directly for city use, kind of going around DT in that instance?
You could imagine a scenario in which that's possible, but work with me on this, that the only real site that we have next to this is the Public Works Center. So you're going to have to run poles and wires everywhere across town to use it on the municipal sites, right? So you're going to have to run poles and wires all the way to City Hall, and then you're going to have to run poles and wires all the way to the fire stations across town, and to the water treatment plant and to the wastewater treatment plant. And so you're basically acquiring all of that infrastructure, all of that debt, that antiquatedness to run that utility. I think we're going to talk about this a little bit later too, that staff have been working on some kind of more non-traditional, non-poles and wires ways to think about municipalization. And we're kind of working on some ideas to present to the commission in November on that too. But no, we'd have to, it's not simple enough just to put them across the street, because it matches load, we'd have to go across.
Gotcha. And my last question, as just a regular consumer that, pays my DTE bill, is this, will I have the opportunity, would the public have the opportunity? And what, if you could just briefly summarize, like if I want to get all of my electricity that I use in my apartment from community solar and from this project, maybe just briefly describe what that would look like for a consumer?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's going to be posted on the My Green Power website as a subscription alternative where people can apply, not apply, they can sign up for this and then receive the credit as well. So that's going to go on the website. Everyone who gets information about My Green Power will know this is a project that they can subscribe to. And then the city is going to do additional marketing and outreach.
Okay, thank you.
So you can, yes.
Carolyn.
There's so much information here, and I think I missed part of what you had said, Missy. So if you wouldn't mind clarifying, you said that the city will use the 26% investment tax credit. Can you describe how, if, and also there's an RFP that's going out for the installation of it, but did you say though that DTE was going to be installing? I kind of got a little bit confused there.
Yeah, fair point. So DTE and the city are running the RFP to build. So we'd have a third-party developer. We're gonna have third parties bid to actually build the site itself. And then assuming that goes forward, right? Like we'll have to see the bids and we'll have to do the pricing. We'll have to determine that this is financially viable. So let's say that it is when it comes back in. Then what will happen is it will be built by that third-party developer they will take the federal tax incentive into account. So they will depreciate the asset over time. It will go onto DTE's books, but we will all get the benefit of that 26% going into kind of the cost of that asset.
Okay.
Thank you for the question.
No, thanks. Appreciate that.
Anyone else? If not, Missy, I'd like to return to Ken Garber's questions. Oh, Ember, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a quick follow-up question from Robert's question. Like, theoretically, the city could own it if DTE, out of their goodness of their hearts, wanted to let us use the transmission line, right? It's just that, like, we have to have this, like, part of it's the negotiation with DTE is that they wanted to get something out of it too, right? And then also, because DTE owns it, we get the tax credit and we wouldn't if the city owned it. Those are components as well, right?
The last part is, I'm not sure, I have to think a little bit, Ember. Your question is a good one. I want to think about what we would own. Would we own the panels? Because we own the land. So is that the thing that we would own? And then DT would still own the transmission and distribution lines?
Yeah, I don't know that. That's kind of my question. So
okay. Yeah, I mean, I think theoretically anything would be possible in that space. We would still have to, I need to unpack that a little bit because none of those things work independently, right? So it's the music comes when the orchestra plays, when all of them interconnect and work together. So I guess the answer is probably theoretically yes, but devil in the details on that one. I'd love to follow up and kind of hear what you're thinking.
Commissioner Cleavy, go ahead.
Yeah, just a comment, Ember. Interesting you raised the goodness of their heart. I actually didn't realize that DTE had a heart, but given the fact that you think they do, perhaps we should ask the DTE Foundation to put up of this, because that seems to be where their heart is. And so if they put up, $50-100 million and built the array and plugged it into their grid and then sold it back to us at below retail rates, like some places are doing in around the country, that would just be stellar. That'd be wonderful. And they could even talk about that in their annual reports. I think that's a fabulous idea that we should pursue. Let's ask them to do that.
Pretty confident that the DT Foundation cannot be investing in the things that the corporation makes money from. But with that, the one thing to consider is we could buy back the asset, right? Like over time being depreciated. So that is something we could consider. If folks will bear with me for 1 second, we've been working on this for a while, almost 2 years of like seeding the idea too. And so we have an opportunity to put 24 megawatts of solar on the ground next year is the development timeline. And so there is definitely discussion starting to happen, which would be if we move forward, in some way, shape, or form with a traditional utility or a sustainable version of a utility or whatever we're going to move forward with. If we do, that asset could be on the books and could be something that we could price out for taking over too. So there's a lot of a dance that's happening right now.
Those investors, they'll want to cash out, and when 7 years or 6-7 years. So you're right. There's a real window of an opportunity there. Bring that back. Yeah, you bet.
So as you know, Missy, University of Arizona of Michigan.
Which one?
I'll still say that. University of Michigan. University of Arizona did something a lot cheaper, but University of Michigan bought wind, and it's all from DTE, and we ended up paying extra for our energy because we did that. Everyone feels good because we're lowering our carbon footprint substantially. In other words, we're well ahead of our 2025 goal because we've done that. Hit it like this year. And so, but nonetheless, we're paying more for it. And what I'm guessing here is that there's a chance that will be in the same boat with what you're describing. Mm-hmm. Is that Ann Arbor and your subscribers will pay more than they're currently paying for their electricity, but they will have the bonus of being able to say they've cut their carbon footprint by a substantial amount.
So there is a chance, right? We need to see what the numbers come back in and we'll be able to answer that. The market, the solar market this last year did not cost folks money in Michigan, which is unique because we didn't have enough generation. And so solar was at kind of a premium for green product. Yeah, it's a weird thing how they bid into the market. And I'm going to go outside of my expertise. If I go much further, I can get someone in to talk to the group about kind of the market and what have. Chuck, you probably know this was a gangbuster year for solar and renewables, period. So there's a possibility on both sides. And honestly, each year could change. 1 year you might pay a premium and the next year you might actually make money on this asset. That's one of the things that we're going to be really transparent about when we have costing for people to be able to see, and also on their bill see. Here's what it costs for the levelized cost to build this asset, and here's the credit you got on the market. You're in the red or you're in the black.
But
so they'll be able to see that.
But what you're doing is you're assuming, and I'm just trying to understand it.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to criticize or anything, because I do think the carbon reduction is worth it. But is there any guarantee in terms of how large the downside could be? Probably not.
Well, we'll know that guarantee when we get, there's no requirement that we move forward. When we get the bids, we'll have that guarantee. Like that's when we start the negotiation on the pricing and we understand the ultimate downside, and the ultimate upside, we don't know. Like that's what we won't be able to understand, but we will be negotiating an ultimate downside.
Because, when we talked about University, when we made the bid here to get University of Michigan to do a PPA somewhere south, where it will almost for sure be a lot cheaper to build, and dispatch, it's possible that there would be enough alternative energy on the grid that was also really cheap, that all of a sudden we could, the energy would not fetch what we wanted. In other words, the downside wasn't really protected.
Yeah.
And that's a concern.
Welcome to our grid is different, right? From a grid like in Texas or in Oklahoma, where you've got wind pushing wind off the grid itself because it's such a cheap form of generation. Here, we're talking about natural gas, and when and coal, like those peaker plants are coming online. So we have I think a different scenario, and I probably should stop and let Chuck respond to this because I know he knows better. But let me say, last kind of framing, especially for our new commissioners, is when the city adopted the energy criteria and principles, this was one thing that we talked a lot about too, was the importance of local. We don't have big pieces of land locally. This is kind of it. If we're going to have a local demonstration project, we can do rooftop, we're exploring community centers and other places, but nothing like this. And so this was the project that really sort of spoke to people as like the iconic draw that we have that's place-based. Other things, other bigger projects, if we move forward, will likely have to be outside. I mean, not likely, will have to be outside if we're doing a large install. Chuck, I feel like I just want to say, did I mess up anything horrifically?
We'll be here all night if I start talking, so I'll not support you, Missy, but I will say that additionality, that locality of generating is exactly what compelled Lansing to build Delta Solar that we own. We sell power back to Lansing for that same very reason, at a reasonable price in their community. It's additive. The ups and downs of tying off to the market, MISO market is a speculative business. I'll just say that. There's no caps. You're pretty exposed unless you can work out a rate structure that maybe has some caps to it, but it'll be capped both sides. You won't get the benefit then either. Somebody else will. So I'll just stop there. But more on that later if we have time.
Thanks, everyone. Anyone else? I have a question and a comment, if I may, but anybody else want to go first? And by the way, I appreciate everybody's time investment in this. And frankly, I would anticipate our next couple of meetings being longer ones because we're going to be dealing with some really significant topics that are going to have real importance to the 820 plan and to residents and costs and things like that. So thanks for sticking with this. I want to bring up a point that our former chair, going back a couple, Wayne Appleyard, would say if he was here. And as Wayne always pointed out, what we need to always be thinking about is the area under the emissions over time curve. And I think one of the things that Missy is trying to do here is she's looking at, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, Missy, and you can comment on my words later, is we're looking at what can we do that's additional and that reduces emissions as soon as possible. And there are other things, as Ken Garber mentioned earlier, that this is a potential asset, but what is that potential asset of value, and under what time frame? And one other thing that we have to think about in terms of what Missy is doing, she's also operating under climate action plan that council approved, and that is basically her marching orders. And we also approved, as did council, as Missy mentioned, or someone else, I think it was Missy, we have the renewable energy criteria and principles, and those are also things that should be guiding us in these actions. So I guess my question is, Missy, and if you would comment on this, if we were to look at this in the time, in the framework, or in the context of reducing emissions over time and looking at this as in terms of additionality, we could include this asset as a part of a second franchise. We could do it a part of CCA. We could do it a part of municipalization. But as my understanding is, certainly the last two have very long time frames. It's my understanding that Senator Irwin and Representative Robbie feel that CCA may never pass. Obviously, we have it in our plan. It's my understanding they think municipalization could take 10 years. So waiting for something like that to happen, as opposed to doing what the city is doing right now, is really violating, in a sense, what we're trying to do is minimize the area under the emissions over time curve. And the only question, at least from my side, is if there is a second franchise, a different way of creating a municipality, that might be different because it may not run up the same way against some of DTE's primary interests. But even there, the time frame may be significant. And so I'm wondering if I characterize this correctly, and if you have any points or counterpoints to what I just said, or anybody else for that matter.
I mean, I think that that's right. This project is also explicitly called out in A20 as a project to have move forward. So we're moving it forward until we find it's not viable. Yeah.
Right. So if, for example, we were to say, well, we think that's the wrong thing, then that is a major revision to the A20 plan, and that would have to go back through council, and council would have to revise the plan and say, no, don't proceed with this project as it was framed in the plan as approved by council. Is that correct?
That's correct. And just to share, the viability is like what we've been testing, right? The technical viability, the environmental viability. So we've been through the environmental assessment. Now we're at the final phase, which is financial viability. Right. And so that is something we'll bring back to you and to council. I think that's real. We have to test that viability.
Yep. Any other comments, questions, closing thoughts? If not, we have one more major topic and then some other just cleanup kinds of things at the end of our agenda.
Great. So just pivoting over, I think Zach got pulled into a planning commission meeting. So I think Thea is with us. Thank you, Thea, for staying with us. As some of you know, in A20, we have disclosures. So we talked previously about the benchmarking, commercial benchmarking, multifamily benchmarking, which actually should be before council first meeting in October. We're just finalizing where it goes in the ordinance for read. So thank you for your support of that. The next ordinance was home energy labeling program. And so Zach and Thea have been working on this in parallel, and they're excited to do kind of a presentation overview of that and the first introduction of a resolution potentially in support of that. So with that, Thea, would you like to take over?
I will. Could you allow me to share my screen, please? Okay, thank you. Sweet. Can you all see that okay?
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you. Good evening, kind of almost good night. But thank you for having me. For those who I don't know, my name is Thea Jägerlener. I am an energy analyst with the Office of Sustainability and Innovations. Like Missy said, I'm here tonight to provide an overview of one initiative that our office has been working on, which is a single family home energy labeling program. Just of note, previously the Energy Commission worked on this program, and at that time, I think it was referred to as time of marketing. So I just wanted to clarify, it's the same project moving forward. We're just starting with a title that better reflects the actions of the project. So I apologize for any confusion, but just clearing that up. So tonight I'll run through what we hope to achieve with the program, how it'll work, and then our anticipated impacts. And so we looked to create a program that will encourage and create an incentive to improve the energy efficiency of our buildings. So we know that energy efficient homes are more comfortable, healthier, safer, and more affordable to live in. This program specifically has the goals of clearly communicating information on the energy efficiency of buildings to prospective home buyers. And by doing that, allow energy performance and expected energy costs to be included in their decision making. In addition, the program has a goal of recommending cost-effective home energy improvements and connecting home buyers and owners to resources at an opportune time, which is when they're buying their house. As I think all on the line are aware, the City of Ann Arbor adopted the 820 plan that lays out 7 strategies to reach community-wide carbon neutrality by 2030. One of these strategies is to significantly improve the energy efficiency of our buildings. And under the strategy, the 820 plan also includes an action to benchmark and disclose the energy performance of our buildings. This represents an entire suite of programs with the goal of improving energy efficiency across our community. The Energy Commission previously had me in to present on the commercial, multifamily, and public buildings commercial benchmarking, so you're well familiar with that one. And so this program is another tier of that three-tier suite, aiming to create an incentive for energy efficiency improvements in single-family housing. So we're talking about this now. We have a lot of work to do. We're not moving fast enough. We need to move faster. Residential buildings represent 1/5 of our total community-wide emissions, so it's a significant piece of our pie that we're looking at. So we know that the city is looking to improve the energy efficiency of our buildings, but why and how should we support single-family housing? So when the National Association of Realtors released the result of their 2021 survey of their agents, it was clear that the majority of realtors saw the value of energy efficiency and utility costs in buying and selling homes. However, less than half of realtors were comfortable discussing energy performance with their clients, which is a big gap. So, and it's understandable, between needing to understand green features, how they're evaluated, and how to explain them to clients, it's a lot to become familiar with. In addition, at the time of buying a home, it's a really key opportunity to incorporate energy efficient improvements. One, you haven't moved in yet, and it might be easier to add insulation or other more project-based improvements. And it's also a great time to pursue green mortgages and wrap in that financing when you have that opportunity. Every home has green features, but we need to find a way to clearly communicate those that information to home buyers. So the Home Energy Labeling Program looks to leverage the DOE's Home Energy Score to provide that consistent information to our community, both on the energy performance of our homes, and then also to clearly communicate cost-effective opportunities for energy efficiency improvements. For those that aren't aware, the Home Energy Score provides information that helps homeowners understand their home's energy efficiency and how to improve it. So after a 1-hour assessment, homeowners will receive a score that uses a simple 1 to 10 scale, and that scale is based off of percentiles. So as you can see in the US, the distribution of energy performance is not perfectly normal, so there's a bit of a skew going up, but it's just on a simple 1 to 10 scale to make it simple you don't need a degree in building science to understand how your home is performing. So after that 1-hour assessment, homeowners receive that 1 to 10 scale. I wanted to also point out, not only will it show your scale or the score at that point in time, it'll also recommend cost-effective improvements. So improvements within a certain number of payback years, and then it'll show what your anticipated score is after doing those improvements. This runs through other information that'll be included as well. And so when selling a home, your home energy score will be included in your home's listing, and then you would need to provide your home energy score report to the buyer at the time of sale. So I said the home energy score requires a 1-hour energy assessment. That does require assessors trained in the home energy score. For those already carrying certifications in residential building and energy professionals, it's pretty easy to get the home energy score, typically a training that's provided for free. The DOE has made this process really simple. You work with a home energy score partner. They take you through the training. You work with a mentor to do one home in real life just to make sure that you actually know what you're doing. And then you incorporate that home energy score into your business model. So it's pretty streamlined, it's well developed, and it leverages these partner organizations that help folks get trained for free. In terms of when we're planning to implement this program, earlier this year, we leveraged the Energy Commission's previous work. We looked at results from cities that had implemented this program and were brand new when we were just looking at it, and now we actually have results from. So places like Portland, Oregon. We've taken that, refined the policy of it, and then we started some stakeholder engagement this summer. And we'll continue doing that stakeholder engagement and some policy refinement based on their feedback. And then with the end of this year, we hope to take that refined policy into legal review, final public input, and then kick off the ordinance approval process. And then finally, that last will actually be filled in with all the fun of implementation. So I showed this chart previously before with commercial benchmarking because I know it's a little complicated, and I hope this breaks it down a little bit. The buildings that are specifically covered under the Home Energy Audit Disclosure or the Home Energy Labeling Program are residential units. So there's no crossover with other programs looking at commercial buildings or multifamily buildings. These are really buildings that aren't being covered by any other energy efficiency program that is in that suite that we have. But specifically, only certain single-family homes would be covered. This is based off of the capabilities of the Home Energy Score itself, and it's the only buildings that are eligible for Home Energy Score are single dwelling units on their own lots or those that are connected horizontally but not stacked vertically. So that's the definition of the covered homes in the ordinance. So who benefits from help? It's a bit of a trick question because everyone benefits. For the home buyer, it's an easily communicated energy performance and cost information, so they're better informed and making one of the biggest decisions of their life. And also, the information they get on cost-effective energy improvements results in more affordable, comfortable, healthier, and safer homes to live in. For the homeowner that's selling their home, it's an opportunity to showcase the green features that all homes have. It's also an incentive for premiums for energy efficiency homes. So we do see that homes that score that are highly energy performing can sell at a premium. There's also no evidence that low scoring homes are devalued in the same way that high scoring homes see an increased value. So it's a win-win. And the science behind that is that appraisals assume the bare minimum of energy performance. And so any improvement to that increases the home score. For real estate agents, we see that homes with an energy score, regardless of that score, sell faster. We also see that the home energy score provides easy talking points and a clear, easily understandable tool to communicate those green features of the home in a way that they can be more comfortable talking about it without requiring extensive research or training. For the community at large, we'll also see progress towards our goals through our increased reduction of carbon emissions from buildings, and this is a bit of our tagline, but healthier, safer, more comfortable, more efficient, and more affordable homes to live in. So we'll also see an improvement to our housing stock overall. Now that I've covered how the Home Energy Score communicates energy performance information clearly to home buyers, sellers, and real estate agents, I'd like to talk about what impacts we'll see from doing that. So when the Home Energy Score assessment provides these cost-effective energy efficiency improvements, it's also an opportunity to link up those opportunities with existing rebates and programs. It's something that I think that we could do. We can improve how we do that, and it's a great touch point for folks who our office may never get in contact with otherwise. And that all results in higher participation in energy efficiency programs and lower energy use and energy costs for those occupying those homes. We see real results from other cities as well. In Portland, over 60% of respondents that use the Home Energy Score report, they use that to inform what projects they would invest in. I think before Portland, we saw about a 7 to 37% implementation of energy efficiency improvements using the Home Energy Score. In Chicago, we saw that homes with a Home Energy Score spent 20 days less on the market than those that didn't have it. And Austin also saw an increase in energy efficiency improvements of buyers that bought a home with the Home Energy Score. So we see the market improving positively and creating an incentive for energy efficient homes, energy efficient improvements. We also see benefits to those living in those homes. The ACEEE just released a report that reveals that moderately and severely energy burdened residents increased dramatically in 2020. COVID really hit people hard, and now more than ever, it's really important that our homes are affordable to live in. Jenny, who presented earlier, also touched on the importance of those living in homes with high energy burdens experienced by lower income households. It's super important, or energy efficiency is an important piece to reduce their energy burdens. So we see energy and cost savings, and that's really, really meaningful, especially for those in our city that are struggling to afford to stay here. We also see that energy efficient homes are healthy and safe to live in. I know we all know this. I'm sorry for going through it again, but when we remove things in our home that are burning fossil fuels in our home, we're much healthier and safer. And these improvements support our local economy. We also, with the support of RMI, were able to more specifically estimate the projected impacts of the first year of implementing the home energy labeling program. They estimate we would need roughly 4 assessors to rate the over 4,000 homes that would be sold in a year. We would see roughly 900 of those become retrofitted, and then those are associated energy savings, cost savings, and CO2 just of our first year, and increased real estate value. So we anticipate true change coming from this program. I know it's late. I want to thank you so much for your time and open up to any questions.
Thea, thank you very much for the excellent presentation and for your leadership on this project. We already have a couple people lined up. Robert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I just thank you for your presentation, Thea. It's very good to know. As part of the roughly 50% of the folks that rent in the city, I was wondering how something like this could be applied for renters.
Totally. Ann Arbor is unique. One, we have so many renters, but we also see that we're calling them single family homes, but a lot of them are rented. So when they are sold, they would still be under this ordinance. We are also working on developing, sorry for 1 second, the commercial multifamily benchmarking ordinance would cover multifamily homes that are over 20,000 square feet, so more larger buildings and homes, I guess, at that point. And then we're also working on developing a green rental program to also specifically address rentals, since we know that half of our city rents, and they're also more likely to experience energy inefficient homes and have a harder time paying to stay there.
Yeah, I would just add briefly to that. It would be great for folks that are looking at a potential rental lease to have that as a piece of information that's included about the property when they're considering whether they're going to rent in one location versus another. I think that would be very beneficial.
Carolyn.
Okay, thanks so much, Thea. Quick question. So it states that the score will be presented on the MLS, and then a detailed report will be given at the time of purchase. Like how far before the final purchase will the details of the report be presented? Because it seems like it would be beneficial for the pending purchaser or the person considering purchasing the property to know, the potential expenses of, improvements that would be made or could be made.
Yeah, and I want to apologize. I am picking up this presentation, and I think I misinterpreted how that slide was written. The way the ordinance is written, as the house is being listed, we would require that the home energy score and the report be listed in any marketing for the home. The way that works out is usually you can't literally include the report in the MLS, you include a link. So it does require this extra step and initiative to really track down that information, but it's there for those that are definitely interested. And then the report itself would also have to be available, included in the package at time of sale. That was a question, but I apologize for that. That was my error.
Councilmember Briggs.
Thanks. 3 questions. So the first is, I think you said it takes an hour to complete one of these assessments, and I was just curious how that gets done, briefly how that gets done so quickly, because having done an energy assessment and things, sometimes they take a lot longer than that. So that's one question. The other one is just if you've thought about how this applies to accessory dwelling units, would that be 2 scores, or, is that like, or would that be covered by the rental program, or, just that sort of interface. And then how have kind of realtors been responding to this type of work in other communities or in our own?
Sure. So how does the score only take 1 hour? The home energy score is not like a home energy audit, and it's not as technically detailed as what you would probably need to do some really intense energy efficiency improvements, but it's an easy first step that gets kind of like the brunt of the information out that you just need for an overall assessment. So they've really pared down the information that you need to make that initial assessment. So they just, they look at what equipment is there. The DOE has really filed down, the streamlined set of information that you need for that initial assessment. And that's defined by the home energy score. That's not us making that up. I think also with COVID, they used to be exclusively in-house assessments. I think when COVID picked up, they also figured out how to do them virtually. And then in other cities like Portland, they've also found that assessors that provide the home energy score were also able to do same-day turnaround. So it seems like magic, but it's been proven that it doesn't take very long. And people that find that it's their business model and what they provide, they've, successfully really made it a streamlined process. How does it apply to accessory dwelling units? That is specifically in the ordinance. I would have to check if it's a separate energy score or rolled into the score for the whole building, but I believe the ADUs are covered, but I will have to follow up with you on that. And then how have real estate agents kind of like perceived this? One, I think it's a new thing and it's an extra step. So initially, I think people tend to have a little bit of hesitation around it. However, we found that really once other cities explained and kind of like took away this level of being scared of something unknown and new, but we're able to present information and results from other cities and kind of just understand what people's concerns were, see if those were legitimate or if they hadn't really arose in other cities. So we've really seen that a lot of pushback from realtors were actually from either fears that never happened or fears that would never happen. For example, there was a lot of pushback that having a home energy score would take a lot of time to sell a home, either getting a home ready to sell or having a home on the market. And we found that 1, same-day turnaround tests or home energy scores are available, and 2, that homes with a home energy score, regardless of the score, sell faster than homes without one. So we've really been able to see that there hasn't been much impact on the real estate process of selling a house. Did I answer all of your questions?
You did. I thought of more, but I'm going to let others go. Thank you.
You're welcome.
It's a little bit late in the evening to be talking energy efficiency, I think, but I'll try my best here. The key is going to be adoption, right? So I think we need to test this a little bit before we start adopting it, in my mind. I know other communities have adopted it. It sounds fairly simple. You get to an energy efficiency score and you can kind of correlate the two. How it directly impacts greenhouse gas emissions could be quite different. I think we need to understand the correlation better. Obviously, I know a lot about this subject, but how this translates into actually being effective, I think we need to kick around a little bit. So I would suggest we look at it a little bit longer, but I think this may be something that could be adopted. The real estate agents are going to have to really buy into it, or else it will not survive. But I'm hopeful, so anything we can do to help, let us know.
Great, thank you.
I'm going to comment real briefly on what Chuck just talked about. Chuck knows this because he's on a working group that is working on this topic, and that is there is a group under Fang Wu's leadership working on energy concierge services. And we have a real opportunity to be able to link this ordinance with concierge services so that if someone gets a home energy score and a list of potential improvements, that individual then could go to the concierge service. And we're looking at an online resource as well as essentially a consulting service. That's obviously going to depend on funding availability and things like that. But by connecting these two, to Chuck's point, this would have the potential of greatly increasing the adoption rate of some of these suggested improvements. So the two fit nicely together. Councilmember Tredina.
Thank you, Chair Mursky. I hope this will be a relatively quick question because I think I know the answer already, but I just want to make sure that I know. So I think I saw an earlier version of this that kind of tied a home energy score to action, and it kind of at some point it might require, there was a proposal at least being discussed that would require a homeowner to potentially make energy improvements prior to selling the home. That is not included in this proposed ordinance, correct?
Correct, that is not included.
Okay, all right. I just wanted to make sure on that because I think, while it's important for, I think, information to be out there, I think it's also important to kind of allow that negotiation to take place between buyers and sellers. And obviously there might be give and take in what is important to some home buyers versus others. And while I think it's important from a community standpoint to have more energy efficient homes, I wouldn't want us to get into the business of kind of negotiating those terms in that as well. So I thought so, and I just wanted to thank you for confirming.
Noah.
Yes, thanks for the presentation. Do we have any estimate of how much one of these would cost to do?
A home energy score?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd have to pull up the estimates. I think Portland saw their cost settle at around $150 per score. So very low cost. I think people thinking of like the more technical home energy audits or HERS scores tend to be a bit pricier, but this is really, a low cost, low time intensive solution.
Okay, and one other quick thing. So as I understand it, this is really just about efficiency changes you could make to the house. I just had a thought that probably this isn't part of it, but has there been any thought of also maybe doing a quick analyzation for how feasible it would be to add solar, or as well as how easy, based on the utility hookups you already have I'm not saying this right, but for EV charging, basically, like how easy it would be to add level 2 charging to the existing setup in the house. Has that been thought about at all? Things like that?
Yeah, I also just want to quickly go back to your previous question. Just as clarification, the home energy score, the price of one isn't set. It's these assessors that are certified by the partners, and it becomes this like competitive business, so they set their own score. So the price I quoted may not be the same price everywhere. It's not an officially set price. We have thought about that. It's not in the ordinance right now, but the home energy score report that you get, the score is set by the DOE, but the information that you include in that report is up to the partner or the city that's requiring it. So if we wanted to include information on other initiatives that we're promoting, such as getting solar and including a solar estimate, or recommending electrification improvements rather than fossil fuel efficiency improvements, there's flexibility there for information that we'd want to include.
Thanks.
Bridget.
Thanks. Would this be mandatory or voluntary? And if mandatory, there would need to be some sort of an enforcement procedure, and I'm wondering if that's been thought through.
Yeah, so home energy score exists, and we're not seeing very many in Ann Arbor. So this would be a mandatory policy that when when you sell your home and market your home. This is information that you have to include. The enforcement mechanism would be at time of sale, requiring that the information is included. It's already an existing process that we have existing mechanisms to enforce on whether or not you include information or exclude information that's required. So I think we're looking to rely on that existing process as this place for enforcement.
So would a sale be held up if this hadn't been done?
You know, I would have to look more into if it wouldn't go through or if it would just result in pursuing until the information is provided.
I'm going to jump in to support with you too. I don't know if you caught this. Zach was actually tagged to be the lead presenter on this, but he got pulled into the Planning Commission. So apologies for that, and sorry, Thea. I can see if he's free and bring him back in, so I'll check.
Bridget, did you have any other questions? Otherwise, Mark. Go ahead, Mark. Commissioner Cleavy.
Yeah, Thea, just quickly, when I ran the Better Buildings program for Michigan a while back, Ann Arbor was one of the participants in that program. Anyway, to Noah's point, we gave a rebate on the price of the energy assessment to homeowners that got with a contractor and actually had the work done. So if they move forward on the recommendations, they got a rebate for the cost of the audit. Maybe worth throwing in there. It wasn't a lot of money, but it seemed to make a difference to people.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, you broke up a little bit on my end. That was a rebate for doing improvements after having the audit?
The Better Building program, we rebated the cost of the audit back to homeowners who implemented the recommendations. So typically they got a Michigan Saves loan or whatever, but when they moved forward, there were a whole bunch of rebates that came along with it, including refrigerator rebates from the utilities and hot water things and da-da-da. And just one of the rebates that they got was the Better Buildings program covered the cost of the audit and rebated that back to them.
Great, thank you.
Bridget, did you have another question? Okay. Thea, I have a question. Hopefully you can answer it tonight. If not, you could provide it because I think we will approve the resolution of support tonight. I think it's just a first reading. And that is, I'm wondering if you can go over the timeline a little bit of when this is done in all the steps and when it's disclosed and things like that. So let's say I'm a homeowner and I approach an agent and we decide that we're going to list. And we know that the market is very hot here in Ann Arbor. I recall a slide saying that the home energy score will be included on the listing. Is it a precondition for being included on the listing, or is it only a precondition that it be available at the time of sale? And how do we incent the homeowner, the agent, everybody involved, so that we really truly have the kind of disclosure that when you walk into an auto dealership and there is the label on the car and it says 26 miles a gallon, that you would have the same kind of at least ability to do that at the time of interest as opposed to the time of sitting down and signing and finding out, oh, my house is a 2 or my house is a 10. Can you, and I realize that every house sale is going to be different and things like that. Some houses sell in 24 hours and some sit on the market for weeks or months. So I'm wondering how the timeline in the ordinance actually reads and what's required.
Yeah, so whenever the house is marketed, whether that's a listing or an open house, whatever format it is, it would be required that the home energy score and its report would be included in that marketing. And if a home didn't have it, they would not be in compliance with the ordinance. That information also would have to be provided at time of sale, and if not provided, then an enforcement mechanism would take place.
Excellent.
And the homeowner would be notified that they were not in compliance with the ordinance if there was a listing without the home energy score included.
Great, good. By the way, I just might mention, Thea and I worked on this starting how many years ago? 3 years ago, maybe, with Wayne and a couple of other people. And it's great to see this come to fruition. And the way you've described it tonight and answered that question, I'm elated. So let's see if we can get this thing through. Any other questions? I think, Thea, you might present a resolution for our consideration. Or Missy, are you going to share that so that we can have a free first reading of that? And
Thea, would you like to, or would you like me to take that?
I am pulling it up right now, so if you already have it up.
Also, if anyone has follow-up questions or things that we weren't able to answer, Zach is still answering questions at the Planning Commission, who is having a very detailed discussion about electrification tonight, which is very exciting. Just email those to us and we'll get them out to the full. We'll take your individual questions and we'll circulate responses to the commission. Just remember not to start dialogue as a whole body, but we'll get responses out so everyone has the benefit of it.
Missy, correct me if I'm wrong, but the way the agenda I read for the Planning Commission was essentially something to the effect of how can planning activities better support 820? Is it something, is that correct? So it may be something that some commissioners might want to go back and listen to or watch the recording of, because it's obviously.
Yeah, this came up really last minute. I believe I got the request for this on Friday night based on how recognizing the buying time here. The Planning Commission has had a lot of questions and they really are, I think, embodying 820, asking developers a lot of very pertinent things. And it's just raised some broader discussions about what is and is not possible. They get different answers from different people. And so they wanted to kind of have a working session to really explore some of that in depth. Unfortunately, this is the time of their working session, so we can't be in both places. So I too will be watching it and will be happy to share a link with the commission if you'd like. I agree, Mark.
Travis, you have a quick question while Missy's pulling that up?
Yeah, no, I actually have it. So I know the resolution's in our packet. Missy or anyone else, is the actual ordinance available somewhere? Is that drafted yet?
Yeah, it is. We'll circulate that to the group. Just note, of course, I think people will pick this up. We don't have the chapter, like those kinds of things will have to come in from legal at some latter point, but the content is. So we'll get that out to the group. I'll go ahead and read. Whereas the city intends to raise awareness of energy performance through data information and transparency with the goal of unlocking energy and cost savings opportunities, increased comfort, and health benefits for residents. And whereas data shows that improvements to energy efficiency will spur economic investment through reduced operating costs and increased asset values. And whereas buildings are the single largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in Ann Arbor, and energy efficient buildings will consume less energy, resulting in fewer greenhouse gas emissions and improved air quality. And whereas reduced energy costs will create an efficient building stock and maintain affordability for residents. Whereas benchmarking and disclosing energy usage across the community was an action identified in the unanimously adopted 820 plan. Resolved, the Ann Arbor Energy Commission supports the 2021 Home Energy Labeling Ordinance. Resolved, the Energy Commission encourages City Council to adopt the 2021 Home Energy Labeling Ordinance and begin implementation.
Missy, I'm curious, we already approved a resolution in support of the commercial and multifamily benchmarking and disclosure ordinance. I assume that the two ordinances are structured very similarly in terms of whereas clauses and things like that. And just the resolve just changed to reflect this particular ordinance.
Yeah, and the memo is slightly different that accompanies it.
Yeah, okay, great.
So our to-do is to circulate, just to kind of close that out, we'll circulate the actual language of the ordinance for the commission, and then folks will respond to questions.
Right. Can I get a motion to consider the ordinance and a second?
So moved.
And we can have a little bit of discussion and then we'll vote on it the next time. Mark?
So moved.
So moved from Mark. Second from someone? From Bridget? Any questions and discussion? We'll vote on this as discussed next time in the second reading, but anything else for Thea or the resolution specifically that people want to talk about? Yes, go ahead, Bridget.
It seems as though this is going to require a degree of staffing to educate realtors and be available to educate homeowners, roll it out, ensure that people are certified to do these assessments, these HERS assessments. I mean, I love the idea and I agree with John. It's great to see this being rolled out, but I still see some details that haven't been fleshed out, and I'm a little hesitant to approve a resolution that doesn't touch on some of those details, because I think a lot of those details, I was on the committee with John and Wayne. I think if we leave those details to chance, we could alienate realtors and home buyers. And anybody on Nextdoor knows that not everybody in Ann Arbor is completely positively disposed to the government. So I'm just wondering if you could field some of those concerns.
Yeah, we'll follow up with Zach also on the mention of the budget in here. But one of the things with the home energy score is it uses these partners that do a lot of the staffing that otherwise would fall in the city, which is, I think, one of the reasons why we're interested in the home energy score. So that process of training, making sure that people that are doing the home energy score are qualified to do it, quality assurance, making sure that the scores that are coming out are accurate. We're looking at ways with a partner to balance that workload. And that's a partner that DOE supports. It wouldn't be something that we would be creating. There's some ones that already exist in Michigan, like the Green Home Institute.
So would their services be free to us?
Right. So the way the partnership works with DOE, and I'll just have to double check on this, is that we don't need to be the partner for them to do a home energy score in Ann Arbor. We would just need a home energy assessor to come to Ann Arbor to do a home energy score.
Mm-hmm. But who would roll the program out and, get it kind of do the first round of education for realtors and be there to field questions from homeowners?
Right. So that would be a staffing requirement that's budgeted for.
To clarify, that's budgeted for, and then we have funding budgeted to cover the training for realtors and contractors about the program. And then the partnership is with someone like Green Home Institute, who would actually do the audit once the marketplace understands what the market or what the audit is and the requirement around it. So we built that into our budget.
Okay. And have we had conversations with realtors about this?
They're currently ongoing. And I think will be scheduled sometime this year to get some input and refine the policy based on their feedback.
So just personally, from my point of view, it would be helpful to put some of that information in this resolution, because again, based on everything I know about time of marketing or what you're calling help, really getting community buy-in is critical to the success. And again, it would really help me feel confident supporting as much as I want to support this. I would rather see us lay really good groundwork so that the rollout is smooth and supported than rush to roll it out and have it end up backfiring. And you may have all of that planned out and be taking that into account, but it would be helpful to see that written into a resolution.
If I can piggyback on that, I agree with Bridget, and I might add, we did have meetings with the Board of Realtors in the past, and I think if there could be some indication of the level of support or cooperation from them, and also in terms of education and marketing and things like that in the resolution, that would be something that I'd like to see as well. Erica.
Yeah, I get kind of on Bridget's point. So the actual assessment is going to be done by a third party, a private third party, or multiple third parties, right? And so the cost of that will be determined by how much competition there is in our community. And it sounds like it would require a minimum, if I remember those slides correctly, 4 individuals in our community to handle the anticipated workload for this. Do we have a sense yet if the market can provide for this? Do we have?
Let me try and see if I answer your question, and if not, let me know. What other cities found is they dropped this program and people saw it as a job opportunity and really flocked to it. So initially, Portland, Oregon, who has a very similar ordinance, this is very much based off of it, they had twice as many home energy score assessors than they have now. So there was definitely demand for people that wanted to be home energy score. It was just seen either for those that already do it as already do energy audits or other energy performance evaluations as another form of income. What ended up happening was that there's also only a certain number of homes sold in cities each year, and so that number eventually kind of normalizes for a number that will sustain that amount of realtors as a solid income. And so initially we might see more than 4 be interested. I actually anticipate that we would see much more than 4. But that's roughly an estimate of a stable income for those 4 people.
Commissioner Cleavy.
I'm just going to say that the Michigan Energy Efficiency Contractors Associations was one of the benefits that came from the Better Buildings program for Michigan, where we upgraded energy efficiency auditors into at a much higher level. They're certified. The Michigan Energy Efficiency Contractors Association, all of its members are certified and contracted in this kind of work. In fact, I think the utilities all require certified contractors in this work for both DTE and consumers, and a handful of municipals that I know. So I'd dare say that an unqualified energy efficiency contractor would have a hard time making a living in this state. So having the contractors, if we put a program together, believe me, the best of the contractors will be here, because this is where the action is going to be, because our housing stock is worth a lot. And they know that the market here is filled with people who believe in energy efficiency and contractors. And if we can provide them with a way to embed this value-added option into their houses, we will move more houses. And believe me, the energy efficiency contractors, they know this. And so we don't have to worry about qualified people coming in here to fill this market gap. All we have to do is set a level playing field and a set of rules, which this ordinance does, and the good contractors will be here. They are here. They are here.
Fully agree. Zach, greetings. They let you out of the Planning Commission alive.
I'm alive.
Thanks for joining us. I think we're basically at the end. I don't know if anybody, Missy or Thea, any particular question that you want to pose to Zach going back, or should we table things and just plan on having a second discussion? It's getting late. Anybody else that has anything that they want to make sure they bring up now? If not, certainly contact Thea, Zach, or Missy in preparation for our next meeting. Anything else? Anything really urgent? Okay, great. So we can move on. Oh, Carolyn, go ahead.
This isn't really urgent, but I think it'll be very beneficial for us to look at the actual wording of the ordinance. So between now and our next meeting, it'll help a lot.
Thank you. Okay, we're now on to the ramp down of the meeting. We have time now for a report from OSI as well as from commissioners. So I'll start, I guess, with Missy. And Missy, I think you have a couple of things to talk about, right?
Yeah, I have a few things, and sorry, I'll go fast, like our meetings tend to go long. So here we go. Green Fair, just want to share, it's October 1st. It's going to be our first autumnal, I can't say that word, in autumn. We're excited about it. So if you have an opportunity, any of your organizations want to table, the deadline is tomorrow. That staff are working on a heat pump workshop, which will be held next week. It's actually at the distilling company. You can come in person or you can join virtually. I'm pretty excited about that event. We're also working on a Biggest Loser competition and working on some contract language to help you too lose some MMBTUs this fall as we get ready for winter. So stay tuned, we'll be announcing that shortly. And then our free tree giveaways. Many of you probably know the time to plant trees is in the spring and the fall. So we're sprinting at a whole bunch of plantings. If anyone wants to volunteer and join us, we have a free tree giveaway on October 2nd, so the day after Green Fair. We'll be at Leslie Science and Nature Center. All of the trees that we had to give away for free went in about 16 hours, and that was 750 trees. So we're obviously going to increase size going forward, but they were just doubled up. And then the following weekend, we're doing a tree planting in the Bryant neighborhood. We were able to get a grant to buy trees for free for that neighborhood. And so if anyone would like to join us, we could use some extra help kind of going out, digging some holes, planting some trees. Hopefully it'll be a very lovely and nice day. And then just wanted to share some other things happening. Our Aging in Place Efficiently work is going really, really well in all things. That pilot is teaching us how great the need is for low-income seniors in our community right now. So I would say if anyone happens to find some grant opportunities, can you please let us know, really scale that program. To give you a sense of magnitude, we have roughly $8,500 to invest per household in helping do efficiency work and aging support. And our first few houses need about $15,000 to $20,000. So we got a really big gap here. And so we're having to prioritize and find new mechanisms. But we are, and the partners are fabulous in that work. So it is going well. We're learning a lot and understanding the magnitude of the need. And then our rooftop solar program, we're getting to final design. I can't wait to bring them back to you. My little excitement is that I expected somewhere between 1 to maybe 2 megawatts, and I think we're going to have double potential generation on rooftops, which is really exciting for municipal facilities because I'll be behind the meter solar. So stay tuned. As soon as I get information, I'll happily bring that to the commission. We expect in the next few weeks to kind of close that out. And then I just wanted to share that we are thinking about some sustainable ways to continue generating energy within the community. And this is something that came out of an Energy Commission meeting, actually the meeting with Paul Fenn and Val Grader. We've been toying with some ideas, and we're going to put pen to paper and bring something to you all shortly for that, especially in reflection of council's recommendation that we come by the end of the year with consideration on a municipal utility. So we want to make sure that we think about a municipal utility in all the ways and all the values that we hold. So we've got that scheduled for tentatively November to come. We're sprinting, trying to get this up, but acknowledging how late this meeting went, the idea of doing it in October feels miserable. So we'll try to get that to you. Those are just some of the updates. One last thing, I think Julie's going to kill me. I know she's listening. We are getting really, really close to 1.5, 2 megawatts of solar through Solarize. So I just saw some numbers come in today. She's going to text me in a second. I'm just waiting for my phone to light up, but it's looking fabulous. So stay tuned. I'll let you know as soon as we hit the 2 megawatt mark.
Awesome. Commissioners, points of interest, council member liaisons. Commissioner George.
Just very briefly, Missy, for some of those dates for the events, are you going to be able to put those out via email? Oh, you're on mute?
Sorry. Yeah, I'll send them out to the group via email. They are on our website and they are in our newsletter for folks, if anyone in the public is listening and wants to.
Thank you.
See, there was, I believe, a web page specifically for events on the OSI website, right?
Yes. Yeah. But I'll send that web page to the group.
Travis.
Very, very briefly, and thanks to our newest commissioners, this does seem like a particularly long meeting, but thanks for sticking with us. I just wanted to give everyone an update that council also kind of worked through just a series of calls with DTE as a storm update, a post-storm update, I guess, and kind of the power outages and things like that. It very much, Councilmember Briggs and I actually ended up being on the same call, but my understanding from a few offhand conversations is a lot of the calls went very similarly, which it turned very much into conversations around, at one point, DTE acknowledging that a lot of the problems were exacerbated by climate change and stronger storms, but then also struggled to commit to us that their time frame for committing to renewable energy and combating climate change wasn't unreasonable. So at times, I will say it got a little combative, but I just wanted to give you that update as well, that we are pushing them in kind of all sorts of ways to try to make additional improvements here. Councilmember Briggs also challenged them a little bit on some of the nature of tree trimming in order to the ways that has been happening. We talked extensively about the My Green Power program and our desire to see that not cost consumers more in order to invest in renewables, if that's truly a priority of the company. And then also really just talking to that, there was some conversation around an effort to hopefully make or come up with a solution that Ann Arbor could contract with DTE to have 100% renewable energy for the city. And just wanted to acknowledge that as part of our A20 goal, that would need to be something that could be replicable, and that it wasn't just a solution for Ann Arbor simply because we're the problem child right now. And so challenging them to really be thinking about broader solutions, so that as soon as other communities said, wait, we want that contract too, they didn't say actually that was exclusive for Ann Arbor. So I just wanted to give you that update because those conversations are happening and relevant, I think, to a lot of the discussions we're having here.
Piggyback on that real quickly, I could send it to you, but I don't know if you pronounce it Lazard or Lazard. They do a levelized cost of energy, and that's something that you can certainly take to a meeting with DTE and show them how competitive renewables are with more traditional power generation forms. So for that argument about trying to get My Green Power costs down, that would be a great tool. I can send that if you're interested. Commissioner Cleavy.
Sorry. Just quickly, on Thursday, we had a last semiconductor on solar energy and embedded energy and embedded carbon in solar. There's a great talk about how not all solar is equal. Some of you were part of, signed on. There were 50 some odd people who did across the state. I think it behooves us to remember that Hemlock Semiconductor is in Michigan, Midland, Michigan. It's one of the largest solar manufacturers in the world, and that when we buy solar, low-cost solar from China, it has embedded energy in it, carbon in it, because they produce their energy with coal and they're adding it. And when you make a solar panel with coal, that embedded emissions goes with it and travels with that panel. And again, you may be able to buy a panel from China and it pays for itself in 7 years, but it takes 45 years for the emissions to pay off because of the fact that it was made with coal and dirty coal and in an energy inefficient way. So if you are interested in this topic, there is a YouTube channel, GLRA's YouTube channel has the presentation. I urge you to look at it. We have someone, a worldwide leader in low carbon solar manufacturing, and they have warehouses of solar in Midland, Michigan. And we're going to be spending tax dollars, to John Mursky's point. If we need to speed up the emissions process, if we're going to do a solar program, we need to take into consideration how these solar panels are made, where they come from, and if they're manufactured with electricity generated from coal, it's probably not a smart investment of taxpayers' dollars. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Briggs, I'm going to ask you to talk about the Ann Arbor lighting ordinance very briefly.
Yes, that is a good update. So council did adopt the lighting ordinance which John was the Energy Commission liaison. I was the Planning Commission liaison during the development. And then also Sarah Mills was also one of the other liaisons from Planning Commission. And then we had some good community participants as well. Sally Uly from the University of Michigan was very influential in terms of the development, but it was great to see it finally get to council and get adopted. And I think it's, if I remember correctly, maybe this September 26th is the date that it goes into effect.
And we're going to be hopefully meeting with the U of M to see if we can push similar kinds of lighting improvements on U of M campus. So anybody else?
You know what, I'm sorry, just by way of, I know there's three new commissioners. For those who aren't paying attention, it was a dark skies, who missed this. It was a dark skies revisions to our lighting ordinance to try to make sure that we were directing light where it belongs, which is on the ground as opposed to up in the sky.
Great. So now we're at the point of second public comment. And I understand that the meeting ID was potentially incorrect. And I think, Carolyn, did you, or Missy, do you have the correct meeting ID? Was it the one that I read off that is correct, or is it incorrect on the agenda?
Yeah, it's posted incorrectly, which
Yeah,
we have fixed for future meetings, but let me get you the ID. It's right here.
The number that I have is, and I think it's the same all year, 913-578-34502.
It's 937-6751.
937
6751
6751
6819.
6819. Okay, so I'll repeat that then along with all the other numbers. So this is an opportunity for persons to speak for up to 3 minutes. Please call 888-788-0099 or 877-853-5247 and enter meeting ID. Check me if I'm right, Missy. 937-6751-6819. This information is not properly displayed on the agenda, so I'll repeat it again. 937-6751-6819. And city staff will select callers that have raised their hands one by one using the last 3 digits of your phone number. In order to raise your hand to indicate your desire to speak, press *9. On your phone, you will hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak, and you press *6 to unmute your phone. When please speaking, move to a quiet area, and please state your name and address at the beginning of your comments. Do we have anybody that's hung with us that long, Missy?
Not yet, Chairman.
Not yet? Okay, we'll wait a few seconds.
I see Commissioner Cleavy's hand up, but that's all I see.
I think that Mark left his hand up from before.
Okay. Oh, it's down now.
Yeah. Okay.
And no one, Chair Mursky.
Pardon me? We do have one? No. Okay. Okay, we can come back to somebody if they come, but in the interest of time, let's move on to items for the next agenda. Missy, do you want to talk maybe first about that? Because we have speakers speaking on the topic of municipalization. You might say where they're from and who they are, and then a few other things maybe about the topic. We're going to devote the meeting to that in October.
Yeah, you bet. So our meeting in October has 2 guest speakers lined up. We have City Manager Randy Knight from Winter Park, Florida, and Jonathan Cohn, who's the Interim Director of Climate Programs in Boulder. Both of those individuals either worked extensively the entire time on the municipalization efforts in their communities or are overseeing them in the case of Manager Knight right now in overseeing the municipal utility. So they're on dock to speak with us next month. And in advance of that, we did circulate some questions, 3 questions, hopefully pretty straightforward. We just want to get a sense of how best to use that time. And so the questions, what I'm going to do is compile them. Excuse me, I'll share them with our speakers. I'll also share them anonymized back with the group so we can get a sense of what it is we want to know to use that time as effective as possible. We can generate questions that folks have and see where we have similarities and differences. And then getting to the council has asked us to consider a feasibility study and having, I'm so sorry, having an understanding of what that is really important. And so we have a question. There is no right or wrong answer in this. We just want to understand, what do you think a feasibility study is and what would be useful for you to know from that. So share anything you want. And again, we're going to aggregate and send back out so everyone can see what other people are thinking in this. And then we can share it with the speaker so our time is as useful as possible with them.
And the due date again for that is the 24th, I believe, right, Missy?
Thank you. I'm going to trust you on that. Yes, it's the 24th.
Yeah.
It is the 24th. Yeah, I just saw it.
So some of you have already submitted questions. It's not obligatory to do so, but if anybody has specific questions, please get those to Missy with a copy to me. Anything else? I guess we may consider, Missy, do you intend to put a second reading of the HELP resolution on the agenda, or do you want to wait until?
I'm going to propose we wait if folks are okay with it. I feel like that's a really heavy topic and we need to read the ordinance and talk about it. So I'd like to give you more time if that's okay. Maybe we could I'll be available to do Q&A if there's any like burning questions that you had, but to keep this really focused, maybe we just focus on the topic at hand.
So as a reminder to everyone, or maybe for the few of you who weren't connected in the last week or so, Council passed a resolution asking that we take a position on a feasibility study and do so by the end of the year. So that doesn't mean that we have to do it in our December meeting. It could be done between now and then. My guess is that we will have 2 very interesting presentations with a lot of Q&A, and that may lead to some more robust discussion, possibly in our November meeting and December meeting. But that's something that we as a commission will need to talk about, is when do we feel that we're ready to take a vote on whether we support a feasibility study or not, so that we meet the request of City Council. Is that fair in the way I've represented that, Council members Tredina and Briggs? Okay, good. So that's our next meeting, and that means we're done with the agenda, and that means we can all say goodbye to each other. And I want to thank all of you for your service and for your dedication to this topic. We've got a lot in front of us over the next decade.